IB Nation, welcome back to the Irish Breakdown Podcast. We're live here on a Monday, which of course means Monday, a little bit of mailbag action for you all. It's the show where everybody out there in the chat is able to drive the conversation. So questions already in the chat. We almost have about 30 already before the show even started. So keep pumping in questions, mailbag or the letters MB before the question to distinguish between what is a question you are asking of us and what is just general chatter in the chat. Of course, we are live here on YouTube. We're also live on Rumble, apparently for the first time, which would be a new little
trying it out.
Intricacy to this show. Yes, yeah, so
we've had a lot of people ask about it, and I've always said we'll try to be on as many platforms as possible. Rumble has been difficult to stream. I don't even know if it's working or not yet. Let me go over there and check and see if it's actually working, Ryan, if it's actually even showing up on Rumble today. So, but yeah, we'll give it a shot. So
give it a shot.
All of those that were hoping that we would do it. Yeah, look, it's live right there. Okay, there we go. So it is showing up. It is showing up. So there we go, man. So going to be on YouTube, be on Rumble, going to be all over the place, man. So
yeah. I don't even know how Rumble works, so I'm assuming that they could throw comments in from Rumble.
I think
as well,
so. Yeah. There's a live chat. I don't know what they're going to look like. I don't know if anyone's actually watching on Rumble. That's all part of the process, man. So we'll find out. We'll find out soon enough. We're also going to link it back to Facebook here soon as well. It used to be on Facebook. And we'll eventually link it back to Facebook as well, just because there's different people that like to watch on different platforms. And so we're going to do our best to try to appease as many people as possible and in their preferred platforms when it comes to our live shows. So it's just all part of the evolution process of Irish Breakdown, Ryan. It's all part of it.
So make sure if you are on Rumble, you can go over there and subscribe to the channel as well. That would be greatly appreciated.
And we do have a couple people that have commented from Rumble. So
nice.
Have you closed the chat yet, Ryan?
I have closed, yeah.
Okay, so like basically if you see like a little green, the YouTube thing is on their name, it's like the red, white arrow. Apparently the Rumble one is like a green with a black around it, so that'll show that it's a Rumble one. So
interesting.
So there we go, man. So we're rocking and rolling and ready to go, man. Lots of great questions today, and including some about Notre Dame women's basketball, which we'll get to at some point in time, who had a huge win this weekend, going on the road, beat number 8 UConn by 15 in a game run. They only had 4 players score for Notre Dame. Hannah Hidalgo, Maddie Westbeld, Sonia Citron, and I can't believe I'm drawing a blank on the 4th. But, yeah, they scored all their points in the game on Saturday. Yes, it was. And Sonia Citron, Hannah Hidalgo went off, true freshman. She was named Naismith Player of the Week today. We had 34 points. Maddie Westbeld had 23. It was a big game beating UConn. So big win for the ladies this weekend. So Nat Marshall also went in double figures also. So nice. It was good to see her get some action. And then Sonia Citron was just locked down Paige Beckers, man. She was outstanding on defense on Saturday night. So hey, let's get this sucker rolling, Ryan. You ready to go, man?
Let's do it, man. Football questions, women's basketball questions, anything in between. Let's do it.
Yeah.
We're good.
Yeah. Start off with Paul Hamilton.
Paul said, what do you think of people saying Patrick Mahomes is the greatest ever now? A bit too early, in my opinion. It's a bit too early. It's slightly hyperbolic.
Clickbait, Ryan. It's clickbait. It's to create discussion. It's to create. If I just went out there and said, boy, I think Pat Mahomes is the best quarterback in the NFL right now, who's gonna engage with me? Nobody. They're all gonna be like, for the most part. But when I started in the best ever, what happens? What happens when I tweet that out? What happens when we say it in the show?
Sure.
Oh, you're nuts. It's this person. And then bam, I'm getting paid. I'm getting engagement. I'm engaged. It's engagement farming, basically, is what it is, Ryan. And you know what bothers me is why can't we just appreciate how great he is and just enjoy that? Because what happens when you say things like that, it's like, I can't let this stand. Like, you're going to compare him to this guy and that guy. And it's like, guys, can we let him finish his career first? But better yet, how about we just enjoy what he's doing now? And the fact that the NFL right now had gone through a long period of time where it was dominated basically by 2 to 3 quarterbacks for over a decade. Right. And we're going through an era now where quarterback play in the NFL is just getting better and better and better and better, and enjoy that. But there's still one guy that when the games are the most important, is still the best. Because, I mean, I think you would agree, Ryan, from looking at stats and how to see, he wasn't the best quarterback from game 1 to 17, Pat Mahomes necessarily. There's other guys that had stats and better this and better that. But what makes Pat Mahomes the best quarterback of this generation is, hey, I don't care what I did in the regular season. This is what I'm evaluated on. It's what I do in the postseason. And he outdueled Josh Allen last week, and then he obviously outdueled Lamar Jackson in a big way on Saturday. The defense helped a ton. I mean, they only scored 17 points. 10 points. I mean, really?
Oh, Baltimore only scored 10 points. Yep.
Yeah, the defense helped. I'm saying like KC scored 17?
Yeah.
Did they punch in late?
No, it was 17-10. 17-10 final. Yep.
Yeah, your defense played a pretty big flipping role in that. But Pat Mahomes is great, Ryan. He is probably, in my opinion, the greatest quarterback of this current generation, right? Which is like, post Brady, Rodgers, Manning. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And he's fun to watch. And that's coming from a Broncos fan. But, he's a
I just think you need to phrase it differently, right? Like, I think the phrasing is what people take issue with, because I think that it's just a blanket statement of greatest ever. And when you're talking about greatest ever, you have to take into account a lot of different things, longevity and championships and statistics. And it's like a full resume thing. I think it's fair if someone wanted to say to me, I think the best of Pat Mahomes is the best we've ever seen of a quarterback. And I would be like, okay.
That's at least debatable. Yeah, it's the least debatable. But, like, how do you compare his resume to Tom Brady's?
You can't. You can't right now.
That's the whole point. How can you compare his resume to Peyton Manning's? And that's the whole point. Now, like, to your point, I do like that. Like, if you were to say, okay, Ryan, here's a question. Who would you rather have in his prime at his best? Pat Mahomes, Tom Brady, Peyton Manning, Aaron Rodgers, John Elway, Joe Montana. I mean, that would be a fun conversation. But now, I will say this, the one thing I think we can all agree on is if Pat Mahomes decided to retire after this season, he's a first ballot no-brainer Hall of Famer.
Oh,
I mean, that's not even debatable. Like, say things like that, Ryan. Like, or guys, we're watching greatness. I hope you understand that. We're watching greatness. Enjoy it, because it'll be over before you realize it.
Another way that I would phrase it is, if Pat Mahomes keeps doing what he's doing and has a long career, then maybe he's the greatest quarterback ever when he retires. Like, maybe that's a conversation that we can have. It was the same thing after the Josh Allen, Pat Mahomes thing. People just don't read very well. So, like, I posted something like, I think that these are two of the most physically gifted quarterbacks that I've ever seen play, or that I probably have ever.
Which
played.
Week? This week or last week?
No, Josh Allen versus Pat Mahomes.
Okay, that's last week.
And they were like, and people were like, "Oh, why are we talking about Josh Allen?" I'm like, dude, Josh Allen's a freak of nature talent. Like, are we not doing that right now? Because people think that me saying that they're most physically gifted means that they're the best. I'm not saying they're the best. I'm saying that when you're talking about just physically ability to throw a football and to maneuver, like, those guys are two of the best ever. Like, I think that's pretty easy.
This anti-Josh Allen thing is very weird as well, Ryan. It's like, oh, it's like, you know what it reminds me of? It's the same crap that I had to deal with listening to people criticize John Elway when he was in his prime. Oh, he turns the ball over too much. Yeah, okay, there was a year John Elway threw 18 touchdowns and 18 interceptions. But you know what? He led the Broncos to the Super Bowl that season because he went off in the postseason, right? I mean, like, you can't evaluate him the same way you evaluate Aaron Rodgers. They're completely different quarterbacks with completely different playing styles and completely different teams. All these things are different. Like, I don't understand why this weird anti-Josh Allen thing is out there with some people. Like, that guy is a tremendous talent. The Buffalo Bills sucked before he got there, and every year you're wondering, is this the year the Bills go to the Super Bowl? Right? I mean, right? Why? You take Josh Allen off that team and put anybody in the NFL outside of, like, Pat Mahomes and Joe Burrow, maybe. I mean, like, who else could do with Buffalo what they're doing, in my opinion? And, it's like when people talk about Lamar Jackson, and I was talking – Vince was over the house yesterday. We were watching that game, and I'm like, it's like some of the takes on Lamar Jackson make me kind of want to, like, I almost push back on Lamar Jackson, but it's like I don't want to because I'm rather fun. I like Lamar Jackson, but it's kind of like, is he really the best player in the NFL? Is he really the MVP? I mean, he does play for, like, what, the number one ranked defense in the NFL. I mean, right? So it's this whole notion of, can't we just enjoy the greatness that we're seeing now, especially in the AFC, man? I mean, Pat Mahomes, Josh Allen, Joe Burrow, Lamar Jackson. I mean, there's some some outstanding quarterback play in the AFC right now, and it's only going to get better. I mean, if the Colts are right about Anthony Richardson, that's going to make it better. I mean, you've got C.J. Stroud, who had a phenomenal rookie year this year. So, I mean, quarterback play in the AFC is outstanding, and Josh Allen is a great quarterback in this era. Is he the best? No, Pat Mahomes is.
I think the MVP award is just such a flawed thing, especially nowadays, because someone said this earlier on a radio station, and I agree with 100%. It rarely ever goes to the best player in the NFL. It usually goes to the player that far exceeded their expectation going into the season. It's like the guy that's the surprise, right? Like, oh, wow, wasn't expecting that guy to do that this year. And then he plays at a high level, and it's like, we're going to give the award to that. So, yeah, it's just a flaw. I mean, it's like the Heisman to a degree, right? Like, there's just a lot of flawed processes with those types of things, but
but I will say this, man, I've enjoyed the playoffs. When I turn off the sound and all the banter that goes around it, I've actually rather enjoyed these playoff games. I have to the point where I'm almost like, I'm borderline want to watch NFL games next year. You know what I mean? Because
you want to hear the ultimate compliment to Pat Mahomes' game is yesterday. They're winning the football game. It's 3rd and 9. Right, or below 2 minutes, right? They just need a first down to seal it. But usually teams kind of just go, we're going to run the football one more time, run the clock, and then we'll figure it out that way. What did Pat Mahomes do on 3rd and 9? Winged it deep down the field to Marquez Valdes-Scantling for a great
concept and a great ball off his back foot with pressure in his face.
How many guys would have even tried that, though? It's like, all right, man. All right. You're that guy.
It was such a great game, though. I mean, you saw Pat Mahomes doing his thing, Jason Kelce doing his thing. Drew Tranquil had a great game yesterday. Kyle Hamilton had a great game yesterday. Zay Flowers had a great game that was ruined by how he finished the game. Not just the fumble, but then even before that, the stupid taunting penalty. You know what I mean? It's like the pushing of the guy down's not taunting worthy. The spinning the ball by the guy's head's not taunting worthy. The standing over him isn't taunting worthy. You put them all three together and you're going to get flagged for taunting. I mean, that's just the reality of it. You know what I mean? And the Ravens basically kind of collapsed when the game was on the line and the Chiefs made plays. That's basically what it comes down to. And that's what happened in the NFC game too. The Lions completely outplayed the 49ers for the first 2 quarters. And then in the second half got completely outplayed by the 49ers. The cream rises to the top. And that's what happened yesterday. The best team in the NFC was the best team in the NFC. The best team in the AFC, when it comes to the game truly matters, was the best team in the AFC. And it was good football, in my opinion. That's the best part about it. It was good football, right? And they were very different games too. But can I say I just love how the Niners and Lions both use their running backs in the pass game and run game. That was fun to watch. Like, that was clinic tape for how to properly use your running backs in the modern game, in my opinion.
They're 2 of the best. Kyle Shanahan and Ben Johnson, they're 2 of the best OCs in the NFL. So,
that was fun to watch.
Kevin Park says, is there a reason Notre Dame isn't recruiting Brock Schatz? I think he had a second part that just said shot, so that people watching know.
Here we go.
He's the tight end, Brock Schott, out of Indiana, that is ranked pretty high by a couple different platforms. 2025 kid.
Yeah, they've got a tight end in the class already that they think is better.
And I think that they are, and Kevin, I mean, we'll see if it's a good evaluation or not, but I think the other tight ends that they're keeping an eye on to potentially be a second tight end, possibly, are guys that they just deem maybe a little bit more talented as that. So I've seen Brock Schott. He's a good player, and but he's also, I mean, he's a little bit smaller. He's only like 6'3", 215, somewhere in that ballpark. I mean, they're looking at guys like today, for instance, Mike Denbrock's going to be by the school of Lincoln Cure, who's an absolute dude in the 2025 class, who's like 6'6" and has a lot of room for upside and that type of thing. So if you're going to take a second tight end,
Nicholas
in the class,
Towns is another guy they like a lot, who's 6'4", 225, but could also play defense. I mean, he's a guy that could. There's just better players on the board, in my opinion. And also, Ryan, they're not dead set on taking a second tight end in this class. They'll take one if the right guy wants to jump on board. They don't, quote unquote, need a second tight end in this class right now. That's part of it too.
Sure.
So, yeah. But that's just the way it works sometimes. Hey, it's like there's a good defensive end from Elkhart, Indiana, and somebody said, why isn't Notre Dame recruiting him? And I said, well, there's probably certain reasons based on what I know of that school that make it difficult. But the other part is, like, he's just not as good as Damian Shanklin. I mean, it's just That's the way it is sometimes, right? So I think that factors into it as well.
Our next question was from Paul Hamilton.
This has to do, I think, with the I don't know what this is in reference to, Ryan. So okay. Is this also in reference to
Paul had the first question, right? So
is this in reference to like a conversation about the Notre Dame 2012 team? I'm curious. I think maybe he has it backwards. Yeah, here. Okay. I think he has it backwards. Here we go. So this is it. So this is the first part, and then I'll bring up the second part.
Gotcha. Okay. So Paul's question: what are your thoughts that 2015 and 2018 were better than 2012? Maybe just because the 2012 championship went so poorly, but I just don't think of the 2012 team that highly. They had a moderately difficult schedule. I think 2015 and 2018 were better.
Well, if you're going to talk about schedule, the 2012 team definitely played a tougher schedule than the 2018 team, in my opinion. I mean, 2018, you had the Michigan game, which was a tough game, but your next toughest game after that was Syracuse. Whereas in 2012, I mean, look, I don't know if people remember just how good Stanford was back then. I mean, that was a really, really good Stanford team back then. And they weren't ranked that high kind of coming into the season because they had lost Andrew Luck. And so they dropped them lower, and they had like that early loss at Washington. And then they lost to Notre Dame, and then they ran the table after that, including a win at number 2 Oregon and a win over a ranked Oregon State team. But that team finished in the top 10 that year. That was a really, really good Stanford team that year, and they had dominated Notre Dame the 3 previous years. I mean, the year before Stanford didn't play well and still won by 2 touchdowns. They beat them what was like 37-10, 37-14, something like that in 2010. Just absolutely obliterated them the 2 previous years. And that was a tough game. Oklahoma that year was a good football team. You had to play on the road. And so I think the 2012 schedule for Notre Dame was a challenging schedule. It wasn't, oh my gosh, how crazy hard was that schedule, but that was a challenging schedule. That BYU team was a good football team, and you also had to overcome some adversity that season too, Ryan, because you had to beat that good or BYU football team without your starting quarterback in Everett Golson, who didn't play in that game. So, you beat a Purdue team that went to a bowl game. I think part of it is because they did have a couple close games against some not very good teams, but they also blew out Miami that year, just absolutely obliterated a Miami team that went 7-5 that year under Al Golden, by the way. And, I thought that was a really good football team. I think a lot of it has to do with how the season ended. Just the not just the loss to Bama, but the Manti stuff and all that kind of stuff. I mean, that team lost 1 game to Alabama. The 2015 team lost 3 games. I mean, they did. They lost 3 football games. That's more losses. They won. What was the big win the 2015 team had, Ryan? Temple, Navy. Yeah. I mean, like, they beat no one. That's the problem with that team. That was a very talented Notre Dame football team. That team should have been better. But what's the big win you can hang your hat on from that season? All right, you don't have one, right? I mean, Temple was there. I think Temple and Navy were 2 teams that they beat that were ranked when they played. And Navy's the only one that they beat that was finished ranked. Temple got screwed that year. They should have finished ranked. I think they won 10 games. They were 10-4 that year. They should have been ranked, but their coach left and they lost to Toledo in a bowl game. So I mean, that's the breaks. They fell out. But that was a top 25 Temple team. Outside of that, I mean, you had to come. Texas stunk. Virginia wasn't good. Georgia Tech stunk. UMass stunk. USC was a mediocre team that year. Pitt wasn't any good. Wake Forest wasn't any good. BC was terrible. You beat nobody. And there's no Oklahoma win or Stanford win on that 2015 docket. 2018, I think, Ryan, maybe you could compare. 15's out. 15, you can argue, is the most talented team, but it's not the best team, not even close to the best team.
That was going to be my whole perspective. I'm not even talking about schedules because when you compare the records at the end of the day, I mean, one team went 12-0 and went to a BCS national championship game, right? Like, I mean, so we can compare the schedules all we want, but in the end, I think if you're talking about just the eye test for me, Paul, it's like, hey, is 2015 more talented than 2012? Yeah, I'd probably say that. Yeah. But, well, I mean, I think we know at this point though, like, it's not always the most talented team that is the best team. Like that rarely ever happens. I mean, 2012 just had something different about them, at least from the regular season perspective. Like it just seemed like they always rose to the occasion, like it just seemed like they always kind of got it done. And, if the Manti stuff doesn't happen down the course of the season and some of that stuff, after the season, maybe it's a little bit of a different BCS national championship game as far as the final outcome. I mean,
even if they would have lost,
really
maybe it would have been a more competitive game, right? Like maybe they'd have lost 27-13 instead of 42-14, right? Like maybe they'd have been able to keep Bama a little bit in check if all that, because what people found out later is that stuff had started to break within the team in the weeks leading up to the game. And it apparently was, I didn't cover the team that year, Ryan. So I'm just telling you what I've heard from people that cover the team who I trust is like, it was creating issues in the locker room. There was a lot of guys that were concerned about it. And Manti was off his game because he had genuinely been, the people I've talked to have said he was genuinely duped. You know what I mean? Like, and it was something that was like, it was, yeah. And so who knows how that game would have gone differently. But to your point, Ryan, the results are the results. I think you nailed it. You said this, Ryan. You said it perfectly. The 2012 team in the regular season always rose to the occasion. Whether it was beating a good team or falling behind and needing to come back and win it late, whatever it was, they found ways to get it done. The 2015 team was always that really disappointing team that you just always felt like, why were they not better? Right. And that's the difference. They did not raise to the occasion ever that season. If you really think about it, they played 3 big games that year and they lost all of them. And that's an indictment on coaching, not the players. 2018, I think you could make a case for because that team was similar, Ryan. They rose to the occasion when they needed to rise to the occasion, right? Beat a good Michigan team in the opener. Dominated a pretty decent Syracuse. I mean, it's a 10-win Syracuse team that took Clemson down to the wire. And pounded them at Yankee Stadium. I mean, they did what they needed to do in that 2018 season. So that one you could maybe argue with. And even though the score was about the same, that was a much more competitive postseason game than the BCS game against Alabama. But to me, I think that's the only other team that Notre Dame has had that can compete with that 2012 team. It'd be the 2018 team, but I'd still probably go 2012 just from a result standpoint. But 2018, I would also argue, had more top to bottom talent than the 2012 team. Right? 2012 was not Notre Dame's most talented team. I don't even know if it's top 3. But, I mean, I would argue the 2011 team was more talented because it was the same team as 2012, except they had Michael Floyd and Harrison Smith and Darius Fleming and Jonas Gray and, a lot of those guys. Like, you could even argue that team was more talented. But that team went 8-5 and this team went 12-0 because there was something special about that 2012 team, in my opinion, Ryan. There really was.
Different quarterback as well, 2012 compared to 2011. But,
yes, he was pretty good. He was pretty good.
Christopher Galloway, coach, if you were going just on size, who would be your starting defensive line?
Oh, that's a good one. If I was going just on size,
Flex Riley Mills back out to strong side defensive end.
Howard Cross is a third stringer for me. If I'm just going off size, I mean, it's Sean Sevillano's my nose tackle. He's 340 pounds. I like what you said, Ryan. I'm flexing. You know what? I'll keep Mills inside since he is over 300 pounds. I'll keep him inside, and I'll go with Tyson Ford. At that big end position, who's a big kid, and then at Viper, I'm probably
like
going
260 something, right?
He's like I'll probably move either Oben over to Viper or I'll go with Boubacar because part of size is also length, and I don't know if Notre Dame has anyone with more insane length than Boubacar on the current roster. So either RJ Open goes over to Viper for me because I think he's longer than Jordan Patelho. They're about the same weight. At least they played at the same weight. And I think RJ's taller and longer. So I'll go with him at Viper or Boubacar at Viper. So if I'm just going off size, that would be my starting D-line, right? It's a pretty big lineup.
Yep. It's a big lineup.
275, 340, 305, and 265, right?
Yep, 263. But
it's not small. It's not small. Yep.
Christopher with another one. How many years for Irish Breakdown?
So, Christopher, if you're going like calendar years of 365, we are entering our 5th season. but we've actually been a thing for parts of 6 years. So I launched Irish Breakdown basically the beginning of October of 2019. So my last game covering Notre Dame for the previous place I worked at was Georgia game. And then I started Irish Breakdown that next week. It was known as something different then, but we pretty quickly moved it to Irish Breakdown. That was Irish Maven, but we started Irish Breakdown as a podcast. And then I turned that into the whole thing. And so, so 19 was the first year covering the team. And then obviously 20, 21, 22, 23, and then 24 will be our 5th full season covering the Notre Dame football team. So it's been quite the journey. Thanks for asking.
John A1. What's up, John? The 2009 passing attack was the best in Notre Dame since 2000. 2017 rushing attack was also a top since then, in my opinion. Is it possible to merge the best of both worlds on offense in the future?
I get what he's saying. I would slightly disagree with the premise on that, Ryan. I would say 2009 was pretty darn good, but that 05 pass attack was pretty ridiculous as well. I would go with the 05 group. I know Jimmy had like the higher quarterback rating and threw fewer interceptions than Brady, but Brady threw for more yards that year. Brady threw for almost 4,000. And let's not forget too, like Brady in 05 also only played 12 games. Jimmy played 12 games because they didn't go to a bowl game that year. But remember that was one of those last years where Notre Dame only played 11 games in the regular season. So they went 9-3, including the postseason. So Brady played only 12 games that year. But I mean, 3,919 passing yards, 8.7 yards per attempt, 32 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. That was a better season. Jimmy threw for 3,722 yards, 8.8 per attempt, 28 touchdowns, and 4 picks. I just think the 2005 pass game was just a more dynamic, scary group. They both had great receiving cores, in my opinion. I would argue that Brady was more of a clutch player, but also I think you had a little bit more diversity of weapons, a little bit, in my opinion. I mean, Floyd and Tate's kind of a wash for Mo and Samardzija, right? But you had Anthony Fasano instead of Kyle Rudolph. Kyle Rudolph was still young at the time. Kyle Rudolph was not as good as what Anthony Fasano was in 05. You had a much better running back out of the backfield in Darius Walker in 05, who was a really good pass catcher out of the backfield. And Matt Shelton was a pretty dynamic big play. He only caught like 15 passes or something like that, but he averaged about 20 yards a catch. Could you imagine how good that pass game would have been in 05 if Raymond McKnight didn't get hurt in the second game of the year?
I know.
That would have been fun to watch, man.
That's what I was expecting. I remember watching the first game of the year when Raymond was still in there. Like I was like, McKnight and Stovall are going to be the guys this year, right? And then Raymond gets hurt, and then you're like, oh, Jeff Samardzija, there he is, baby. All right, there we go.
Yeah,
there we go.
To his point, though, the question was, is it possible to merge the best of both worlds in the future? From a
volume.
From a volume standpoint, I don't think so. From an explosiveness, impactful, we can burn you either way standpoint, I do.
Right.
Because in order for Notre Dame to kind of have that many yards, Ryan, they either need to have to be so insanely talented that it's just kind of like, wow, like, man, they're just, like LSU of 2019, just that freaky year where just like everything kind of comes together, right?
Yeah.
But because like think about it, I mean, the pass offense in 2005, for example, averaged 330.3 points per yards per game. The Notre Dame offense in 2017 averaged 63 yards per game on the ground, I believe. Let me just pull that up real quick just to make sure that I'm correct on that. But I believe I'm correct on that. It was 269. Okay, I was wrong. I was not correct on that. This is why you double check your work, Ryan. They averaged 269 per game. That's 599.6 yards per game.
Yeah.
Like that would have been 56 yards more per game than what LSU had this year. Right?
Yeah.
Like that's not happening. I'm going back over the years, Ryan, and the last time we saw a Power 5 team, LSU in 19, that's 31 more yards per game than what LSU had in 2019. If that offense couldn't do it, then Notre Dame's not going to do it. From a volume standpoint, from an explosiveness standpoint, yes. From an efficiency standpoint, yes. From a, impacting in the big games, it certainly can match what those two teams did, because the running game for Notre Dame in 2017 was a little bit inconsistent in big games. But yeah, they can do it can they be dominant in both phases? Yes, they can. Well, can they do it from a volume standpoint? No. Brian, you're correct. They cannot.
They can't do it from a volume perspective, but I would put it like this to your question, John, is that balance has been something that has been missing at Notre Dame, right? The ability to do both of those aspects, which is why I'm assuming that this question is being asked. And I would say that for me, the 330 yards per game that Brian talked about for 2009 and the 269 yards on the ground in 2017, I think it's the ability for an offense to be either one of those identities in a given game, right? Because we've seen it too much over the last couple of years, where it's like Notre Dame's run game goes down the tubes, and then the passing offense has to try to be the volume getter, and you're just not able to sustain and be that type of offense. You need to have weeks where you could throw for 330 and be an explosive passing attack. You need to have other weeks where you can be 269 on the ground and be incredibly dominant. So there's going to be some games though where those things even out, where you're running for $180, you're throwing for 280, and it's just like, okay, that was a really good day of balance. But then I think the key though is that you need to be able to lean on one when a team takes away the other. And I don't think Notre Dame's done that enough over the years.
Let's look at some examples, Ryan, from that 2017 season. Georgia was able to slow down the run game. Notre Dame's offense was done. Miami was able to slow down the run game. Notre Dame's offense was done.
Yeah.
You look at the 05 team, right? And some of they were able to put up big yards, but they weren't always efficient in some of those games, right? They weren't, they needed to be able to balance the passing game out in the bowl game. First half they did, game was competitive. Second half they couldn't, and Ohio State won by 2 touchdowns. And so, and even a better example is like 06 against LSU. They completely shut down the run game, and the pass game, the run game wasn't good enough to do anything. It was the same thing with USC in 06. So I think your point is absolutely spot on, Ryan, is when one part of what you're doing is, because there's teams that are good enough to take away your run game, even if you have Quentin Nelson, Mike McGlinchey, Alex Bars, Tommy Kramer, Sam Mustipher, right? I mean, even if you have those guys, there are going to be teams that are good enough to shut that down. Are you good enough in the other part of your game to go out there and win? And the answer is no. They haven't been in those seasons. And that's where Notre Dame's got to get to. I think you're absolutely spot on, is you have to be you have to be an efficient and explosive group in both areas, in my opinion. And Notre Dame can get to that point, whether it's 190 yards per game rushing or 200 and let's say it's 190 yards rushing and it's 280 yards passing, which I believe is 470 yards. That's pretty good. Even if you're 300 and 200, that's dynamic for Notre Dame, right? But there's going to be some games where you need to be 350 and 150 or 350 and 125 because this team said, hey, our game plan is to stop that. I was a part of the best offense I was ever a part of was that way, Ryan. It's like we had 3 great receivers. We had a big-time quarterback. We had a running back that was 1,000 yards. And so we'd go into games. Like we played Phil Longo's team when he was at LaSalle. And we scored 72 points on them. And they were just, we didn't pass the ball, but for like 150 yards. I had 2 receivers that played in the NFL on that team. We hardly passed on them. Why? Because they were just geared towards stopping it. So Mike Hilliard runs for 300 some yards. You know what I mean? Then there's other games where they would try to, take this guy away. And I've talked about how we played, St. Peter's, and they tried to take Yard and Brantley out of the game. So we just used him as a decoy, and Michael Floyd and Randy Velakovich and those other guys went off. That's what the great offenses do. If you want to take Jamar Chase out of the game, fine. Justin Jefferson's about to catch 15 balls in this game, right? Yeah. If you want to take Jamar Chase out of this game, fine. Lamar, if you're good enough to take those 2 out of the game, fine. Terrace Marshall, Thaddeus Moth, and Clyde Edwards-Helaire are going to beat you. That's how you need to be. Where if they can take this out of the game, fine. Take that away. We're going to crush you with this over here. Because there just aren't that many teams good enough to stop both, not for 60 minutes. And that's really what it boils down to. But it won't ever be, a volume. It will never be that way from a volume standpoint, in my opinion. If they were, I'll say this, Ryan, if Notre Dame was able to run for 6.3 yards per play and pass for about 8.8 yards per play, that's a dynamic, crazy good offense, in my opinion. Like really good offense. I'd like to see but I think if they were a legitimately 6.3 yards per rush team, I think what you would see is the yards per pass would go way up. Just because you'd have to spend so much time trying to slow down the run that it would just create more of those easy pass game opportunities.
So we see with the San Francisco 49ers right now with Brock Purdy, and his yards per attempt average and everything is great because his run game is fantastic under Christian McCaffrey. So it's all interrelated. John A1 with another one. Is it safe to say Sam Hartman had better wide receiver room at Wake than he did at the time in Notre Dame? How did the 2024 pass catchers stack to what Riley had during his Duke tenure?
I think that's very fair to say that he had better receivers at Wake than
especially
once Deion Colsey got hurt and Jaden Thomas got hurt and Jaden Greathouse was dealing with his issues. And they're just, I mean, could it have potentially been better? Sure, maybe. I mean, but I believe A.T. Perry's playing in the NFL right now, right?
He started for the Saints down the stretch of the season.
Right.
So, he is.
And Jamal Banks is obviously a good football player. Taylor Morin, Keyshawn Williams. So, yeah, I would say, I forgot about Donovan, who will be, I believe he'll be back he's coming back next year, right?
He's definitely not in the NFL draft. So
he hurt his knee early in the season, so I think he missed.
I thought he entered the portal. Did he? Is he going back to Wake? I'm not sure.
Good question. I don't know that. I just know he missed the year. Wake. Let's see. See if he transferred. That would be a heck of a pickup if he transferred somewhere. So looks like I don't see anything about him transferring. I know Jamal Banks jumped in the portal, but I don't know about Donovan Green. Gotcha. So as far as Duke, though, it's not even close, in my opinion. Like Duke had we talked about this, Ryan, at the time of the game. Duke has nice receivers for their school. They had some solid receivers. The Calhoun kid is a solid player. The other kid that Riley Leonard beat out at quarterback, you know what I mean? Like he beat him out at quarterback and they moved him receivers to best receiver. Not having Eli Pancol this year hurt them a little bit because he gave them in 2022 a little bit of a bigger body, presence. He was a solid player. But I mean, even if Notre Dame can sustain a couple injuries and still have way more talent in the pass game, in my opinion, than what he had at Duke. I mean, the tight end is just way better than what he had at Duke. The running backs at Duke were pretty good out of the backfield. And that's something that encourages me, Ryan. I did an article last week saying that Notre Dame needs to do a better job with the current makeup of the roster. I think the running backs need to be a big part of the pass game, in my opinion. And we did see some of that from Duke the last couple of years. Not always as much volume-wise as I would like to see, but Riley was more than willing to throw to the running backs in some of the bigger games. But even there, those kids he had last year were solid football players, pretty good for Duke. But they don't have the God-given ability that Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price and Jabron Payne and like Jabron Payne to me is just more physically gifted than those guys as well, and he's Notre Dame's number 3 at best. Keedron Young is more physically gifted than those guys. They're much more experienced. Aeneas Williams is that way, and so. I don't think the talent is anywhere close. That's the big difference between him and Hartman. Is Hartman? We even said at the time he threw some really good receivers at Wake Forest. Didn't have much of a running game. I'd say Duke was a more balanced offense. Even if you take Riley's rushing out of it, they were a better. They didn't have to necessarily run Riley to be good in the run game with the backs they had and the line they had last year when it was healthy. Wake never had that. But the pass game weapons aren't even close, in my opinion, Ryan.
Well, Calhoun was probably the most talented receiver they had, and I mean, for context purposes, he is in the draft this year, and he went to the Hula Bowl, which is a lower tier bowl. Like nothing wrong with it. He'll still get a shot at the NFL, but ultimately, we're talking about their best player probably being a priority free agent in the NFL. So not a ton of talent at Duke last year from a pass game perspective.
A.T. Perry was a 5th-round pick, but I believe you've said in the past if he wasn't injured. Probably goes higher. Didn't you say that?
He actually went even later than that. Yeah, he had a medical red flag on his knee, but he ended up obviously starting for the Saints during his rookie year. So I think he was 7th-round pick. Ended up being. But,
looking at it now, he was 6th-round pick, so right in between. Yeah, he was a 6th-round pick. But like you said, that was a medical issue for that one.
Yep.
So he was like kind of like right in the middle of round 6. The Saints took him there.
Yep.
So the weapons are much better. Absolutely. All right. Good stuff so far. I like this conversation we're having so far.
Irish Blooded with the question: what games are you looking forward to more, Louisville for revenge or Florida State as a higher quality perceived opponent?
Well, for me right now, Ryan, it's Louisville because that game's first. And to me, the big win over Florida State doesn't matter as much if you don't beat Louisville. I mean,
Yeah.
So it's not so much I'm only worried about the next games. I'm not giving you. I'm not like copping out like, oh, the only game I care about is Texas A&M. No, I mean we're grown ups. We can look at the overall nature of the schedule. I'm just saying, like for Louisville, for me, we're going to learn a lot about this football team from a character standpoint. We're going to look a lot about this football team from a cultural standpoint with how they play against Louisville. So that's why I'm really looking forward to that game. And if you do what you need to do against Louisville, then I can focus on, okay, can they get a big win over Florida State? But here's the thing. I really like what Florida State's done in the portal. They have some good players coming back, but to me, Florida State still has to show me that 23 wasn't an anomaly season.
Yes.
That they can be the cream of the crop in the ACC. I expect Florida State to minimum be 9-3 next year, but like 9-3 is a whole lot different than 12-0. And Louisville has a lot, and it's not just because of the portal. It's just Mike Norvell hasn't shown me at Florida State he can be that guy yet. And can he be that guy without Jordan Travis? I mean, that's a fair question. I don't think Jordan Travis is an irreplaceable player, but when you've only had one guy, it's a fair question to ask. Louisville, to me, is a team that I expect a lot from next year, Ryan. I think they've had a very good portal offseason as well. They've improved both sides of the ball in the portal, in my opinion. They got like 3 kids that started for Tennessee last year on defense in the portal this past season. I love that receiver they got from South Alabama, right? The kid from
Lacey.
Lacey. Ja'Cory Brooks, we'll see. He's got some ability, but he never did a ton at Alabama. Or at least he was kind of back and forth a little bit at Alabama. But they got some weapons. They got the kid from Toledo that rushed for like 1,400 yards last year. Like that was a good pickup. He's a completely different type of back than the Jordan kid that they just had this past year.
Yeah, the big kid. I forget his name.
So, I mean, Tyler Shuck's an okay player, but guys, we've seen Jeff Brom have really good offenses with quarterbacks that have less physical ability than Tyler Shuck. You know what I mean? So, they'll be dangerous and they'll be a good team again. And I hope they are good again because I don't want getting revenge over a team that beat you the year before because they suck. It's like, it's not really revenge. You beat up on a inferior opponent. I want Louisville to be good again and to beat them. And if we learn what we need to learn about Notre Dame, then I'll be talking about, okay, this Florida State win could be bigger. But I don't know that it'll be even perceived as a better win because we need to see how good Louisville is going to be next year.
I'm in full wait and see mode with Florida State. I am. I think we've talked about it a little bit, but I understand that Jordan Travis had his faults, but
he's a winner, Ryan. Know. That's what you're trying to say. Look, he's just a winner. As a college quarterback, he's a winner.
I would take him over DJ Uiagalelei is all I'm saying. Like it wasn't even like that big of an analysis. Like I would just simply take him. You're also losing Trey Benson. You're losing Johnny Wilson. You're losing Keon Coleman. Defensively, you're losing Jared Verse. Like you're losing some legitimately very good pieces, obviously. So we'll see because we have seen in the past where one portal haul hits like awesome, all that hit. And then the next one, it's like, all right, you didn't quite get as much out of that as what you did previous year. So I'm just in wait and see with Florida State a little bit. I think Louisville is going to be pretty dang good, man. Like, I think they might actually they could be better this year than they were this past year, in my opinion. I believe it. I mean, we'll see as far as offensively. I mean, I think you can pretty much depend on Coach Brom to be able to get the offense looking legitimate because they obviously have some weapons. Defensively, though, that defensive line is going to be really good, man. I'm here to tell people right now, like they have Thor Griffith, they have Tyler Barron transferring in from Tennessee, Ashton Gelati's coming back, who was a good defensive end for them last year. Like,
he kicked Notre Dame's butt last year.
Good. Yeah,
that kid kicked Notre Dame's butt last year. Yeah, it really is. And I don't know what they have at linebacker, Ryan. I did not look at that, but like their safeties they got in the portal from Tennessee are good football players. They're quality football players. So they're going to be a dangerous team next year, no question about it. And
they had another safety coming back to Devin Neal, who I think was an All ACC performer last year, and Quincy Riley came back at corner for them too.
Oh, did he? Really that's big for them. He was a really good football player. Really good football.
He played really well for them.
Yeah, that was a good look. The bowl game was an ugly. I just don't care about bowl games in situations. I mean, they had so many guys out. It doesn't tell us a whole lot. The Kentucky game was their biggest missed opportunity last season as a football team. Like that hurt them. I didn't expect them to beat Florida State. They weren't going to beat Florida State. Even with the backup quarterback, they weren't going to beat Florida State. But they should have beat Kentucky. That's the one to me that really took a lot of the shine off of what was otherwise a very good season. And it also is going to be year 2 under Brom too. Let's not act like that's not going to have an impact too. They're going to be in both systems a year longer, which is going to help them as well.
Yep. John A1, rank the following quarterbacks on their running ability and schematic diversity their skill sets bring to the play caller. Well, that's 2 parts to a question, John. So we need to separate this a little bit. All right, from running ability, let's just focus on running ability, and then we'll go to schematic diversity. Running ability, you have Jaden Daniels, Brandon Wimbush, Malik Zaire, Riley Leonard, Desmond Ritter. Rank them based upon rushing ability.
That's a really good question, Ryan.
Yeah. I think I have my answer already.
The top 2 for me. Well, who are the top 2 for you? I mean, for me, it's Jaden Daniels
and Brandon Wimbush.
Yeah, same here.
That he has listed.
Malik Zaire, I just don't know if we saw enough of Malik and how they would use him. Malik was used more as a scrambler other than the LSU game. Like the LSU game, they used Malik as a designed runner. I mean, I still remember and he could do things as a scrambler. I would still put Riley Leonard ahead of Malik just because we just saw so little of Malik, and a lot of it's projection. And so we're just going off of what we've seen. And I would put Malik way ahead of Desmond Ritter, in my opinion.
Desmond was really athletic, but like he's not really a great runner though. Like he's just a really good athlete, but
a lot of his stuff came on scrambles and just simple read zone pulls where he was wide open on the backside, to your point.
John, for me, I think you already have it in order. I would go Jaden Daniels, Brandon Wimbush, Malik Zaire. Flip Riley Leonard, Malik Zaire, then you have it in order. So Jaden Daniels, Brandon Wimbush, Riley Leonard, Malik Zaire, Desmond Ritter off of just rushing ability for me.
I would consider Brandon Wimbush ahead of Jaden if we're talking about just the run game, taking scrambles out of the equation, Ryan. I'm curious of your thoughts on this. And I don't think you agree, but just curious as to the thoughts of where I'm going from. Just overall run of the entire running package, Jaden to me is number 1 because he's a great scrambler. Like he makes great decisions. He's quick. He's explosive. If I'm talking about just building a run game around a running quarterback, I kind of lean towards Brandon because I think Brandon can make it through a whole season. I don't know that you could necessarily do as much as just pure run game, just pure quarterback designed run stuff, quarterback power, quarterback counter, those type of things. I would consider putting Brandon number 1, but if you take the whole package that includes the running quarterback that's just scrambling and things like that, that's where Jaden to me is the clear number 1. Brandon was a good scrambler, but Jaden is just so first step explosive, getting through the hole and getting outside that he has just more speed than Brandon did too. He's faster than Brandon was. That would be the only asterisk towards that is if we're just going to stick to run game only, designed QB run game only, I'd consider putting Brandon ahead of Jaden.
That's fair. Yeah, I'd be completely fine with that. But obviously, when we're talking about the full spectrum, I would take Jaden number 1.
Yes, it's a clear number 1. Well, here's a follow-up question for you, Ryan. What's closer? Taking the whole aspect of running the football, so run game and scrambles. Who's closer, Brandon Wimbush to Jaden Daniels or Riley Leonard to Brandon Wimbush?
Oh, Riley Leonard to Brandon Wimbush. Yeah.
Agreed.
Yeah. I think Jaden's just the different. I mean, he did some stuff last year where you knew he was going to eventually tuck it as a passer, and it's just like you couldn't do anything against him. Like it was just wild, man. It was like parting the Red Sea, and it was just cutting back against the grain, and it was just insane what he was doing.
And the way that LSU was constructed offensively helped too, Ryan, because the only way you could really stop Jaden Daniels from hurting you with his legs is to basically just play gap control and keep him in the pocket. But they're so good at receiver and other things where if you did that, he just, okay, fine, I'll just throw for 450 yards. You know what I mean? Like he wasn't like Brandon Wimbush, where if you wanted to stop Brandon Wimbush from running and just keep him in the pocket, the offense is screwed.
Sure.
You know, we're fine, keep Jaden in the pocket. Okay, that's fine, because he's going to go out there and rip you up throwing the football, because now you're basically going to give him time to throw the football because you're not attacking. Because the danger is if you attack him, if you don't get to him, there's nothing in front of him except grass or turf. And he was so fast. I mean, there's times too, Ryan, where he'd get outside and you're like, oh, that's going to be a nice little 10, 15-yard gain. Oh, he's still running. Oh, he just passed the secondary.
Yes.
Oh, he's going into the end zone.
Because he was probably a high 4.4 athlete. I mean, he's probably going to run 4.47, and he just long strides. It's just different. Yeah. It's a different animal, different athlete. Yep. All right, diversity. I mean, if we're talking about just ability to be a run pass option, I guess is kind of how I'm taking that ability to do more, be balanced. I would probably go from top to bottom. Jaden Daniels. I would go Riley Leonard. I would go Malik Zaire. I would go Desmond Ridder, then I would go Brandon Wimbush as far as being balanced.
Here's a question for you, Ryan.
Yeah.
Take away the 5th year that Jaden Daniels would not have had if it wasn't for COVID, and just evaluate him off his first 4 years of college. Yep. Does that change your ranking at all?
It makes it closer between 1 and 2, but I think I would still keep it the same, honestly. I'd probably keep it the same, but it would definitely be a tougher conversation between number 1. Definitely.
And here's why I would keep it the same, but it would be tougher to decide, is because with Jaden, at least you had 3 years worth of film. With Riley, you really have 1 1/3. That's it. But if you look at their single season production, Riley Leonard was actually more productive as a passer last season than Jaden Daniels ever was until his 5th year.
Yes.
Which is, which is saying something. But even last year, Jaden Daniels was a dynamic runner. He led them in rushing with over 800 yards last year.
And he didn't really have
In this year, Ryan, it's funny, is he rushed for over 1,000 yards, but he had 50 fewer carries this year than he did last year because he did so much more from a scrambling standpoint, getting out of the pocket and really hurting people's standpoint. And when Logan Diggs was healthy, they had a legitimate complementary piece to him in the run game. You go back and look at how things looked when Logan Diggs was healthy and running. It was a much more balanced situation, in my opinion.
Agreed. Yeah.
Yeah, I would actually probably put Desmond Ridder 3rd on that, Ryan. Just from what we saw in college, again with Malik,
bigger sample size.
Yeah. And Brandon's 5th. I mean, in that, because he just by the time he became a starter, he just offered so very little.
He was an option quarterback by the end. Basically. He was an option quarterback by the end. Yep.
And it's sad because that's not what he was coming to Notre Dame. So it is.
I was super excited about him. I remember when Kaiser left, and I remember Kaiser's last statement. Someone asked him about Brandon Wimbush. He's like, "Dude, that dude could throw a football 75 yards from his knees." And I was like, "Oh, that sounds like fun." But never really materialized.
This guy went on the road and threw for 400 yards against IMG Academy in the rain, and that's what he did as a senior. It was insane. He was really good. I mean, he was on the field. I remember watching when he was a senior going against Jarrett, the kid from Tennessee, Garantano. And you're just like, Brandon Wimbush is so significantally better than this kid. It's not even funny.
Jared Garantano was also not good in high school either. People forget, but he was not good in high school either. I'm pretty sure. I forget it was his junior or senior year, but the 1 year he had more interceptions than touchdowns as a high schooler. It was a
junior year.
I was like, are we sure this guy's good? I don't really. Even though he keeps having a couple of copies in the NFL, though, man, he keeps sticking around on practice squads and stuff. So whatever.
Exactly.
I actually know the agent that represents him, which is pretty hilarious. It was just pure he doesn't have an agent. Will you represent him? Sure. I guess. And it's worked out. I mean, made a little bit of money. So yeah, it's working.
Yeah.
John A1, for a program like Notre Dame that has a strong offensive line recruiting track record and a head coach that prioritizes running the ball, make dual threat quarterbacks a priority in recruiting? ?
I will say this, Ryan. I think you cannot recruit a quarterback who can't do something with his legs. And so to me, CJ Carr and Kenny Minchie are the baseline of what I would look for in a quarterback at Notre Dame. Sure. I don't think it has to be a true dual threat in the Riley Leonard, Deuce Knight standpoint, right? I think you can also get away with a quarterback who just is really athletic in the pocket and can run. CJ Carr can run read zone. I mean, you can run stuff where CJ Carr can read it and pull it and take off. You can do that with Kenny. I think CJ's more of a natural runner than Kenny is, but Kenny's athletic enough to do those things to where if it's 3rd and 4 and you want to crash the backside the way that teams did this, Steve Angeli can do that. Steve Angeli can run the football. If you need him, he can run. He did it in the bowl game.
He literally did. Yeah.
Yeah.
Literally did.
And then also showed things. So if you can give me a minimum that type of quarterback, that's the minimum of what you need. What you can't have is a guy like in the current system, like you wouldn't go out there and recruit a bunch of Jack Cones. And Ryan, I'm saying it because I love Jack Cohn. I think Jack Cohn did so much for the Notre Dame program in his 1 year, but you're just not going to recruit that kind of guy out of high school. You may bring a guy like that in for a year because you're in a tough spot, but you need a guy that can do damage with his legs. But it's also, you can't bring in a dual threat guy who doesn't have potential throwing the football. Like, you can't recruit a college version of Brandon Wimbush either. And when I look at a guy like Deuce Knight, is Deuce Knight a great passer right now? No, he's not. But he has the tools to become a really effective passer. And you need that. He's got a big arm. He's got a nice release. He understands ball placement. As his footwork gets more precise and cleaned up, he'll even be better with that kind of stuff. So you don't need a guy like Deuce Knight and Riley Leonard. But if you have one, it does make you more dangerous in that regard. It is. It really is.
Yep.
It really is.
And I think that's where it's going too, John, in general. Like, I don't even think it's a Notre Dame centric thing. I think a lot of teams they would love a dual threat quarterback if they get it on the college level, because it's just so much more to account for, man. When a guy can do things with his legs, it's a headache. I mean, ask any especially defensive coordinators that like to try to run a lot of man coverage, which is kind of where the world's going, especially with like match coverages. Dual threat quarterbacks stink, man. Like, they are hard to defend when you want to run a bunch of man coverage. Your back's going to be turned to the quarterback all the time. It's not fun. So, yeah, if you can have that type of dynamic, I think everybody wants that now at this point. So at least it's trending that way.
Yeah.
Except for maybe air raid quarterbacks that just like to drop back and 3-step and get it out.
Yeah, the Mike Leach offense, may he rest in peace.
Rodgers
could certainly still get away without that, but it's just it's a different deal. Yep. We did have a couple super chats down here, Ryan, that I wanted to get to. And we'll start with Michael S.
Michael says Reese to Cleveland, Tommy Reese to Cleveland as a tight end coach. When did he ever coach tight ends? Cleveland press say he developed Michael Mayer. Is it a step backward from another offensive coordinator position in Power 5 or pros?
Well, first of all, I don't care that he never coached tight ends. I never coached all running backs before, and I never played running back. In my first year coaching running backs, I coached an All-American. I mean, if you know the game, you can't run the Notre Dame offense as an offensive coordinator at age of 30 or age of 50 if you don't have a pretty good idea of how the game works at every position. Sure. And tight end's one of those positions he'll be fine. The O-line coach will help out with a lot of the blocking stuff. Tommy knows what he wants. He'll be fine there. But they're bringing him in more so for the pass game stuff. And that's what they're saying. Right. Yep. Exactly. And so I think this is a good move for Tommy. I felt he's always wanted to be an NFL coach. It was going to be harder for him after only 1 year at Bama to go from that to, and the offense was just kind of okay. He wasn't going to get an OC job in the NFL. This is going to get him on track there. I mean, this is going to me, get him on track there faster than going to LSU and being Brian Kelly's offensive coordinator at LSU, in my opinion. So I think, Kevin Stefanski, the head coach, is an offensive guy. There's some more weapons to work with there. If they go and have success, Tommy will get a chance to, get hired as somebody's quarterback's coach. And then from there, he'll have a chance to become an offensive coordinator. Unless, here's what also happened is who's Cleveland's OC? Did they just hired Ken Dorsey, right?
They
just hired Ken Dorsey, right?
Yeah.
Well, who knows if he has success, does he get a head coaching job or does he get something else? Who knows? I mean, that's how the NFL is, man. You go from someone nobody ever heard of to an NFL head coach like that. I mean, 3 years ago, who knew who Dave Canales was, right? I mean, it happens quick. So to me, if you want to be in the NFL, get your foot in the door in the NFL. And as a full-time position coach for a team that was in the playoffs last year, that's a good hire for him. And so I'm happy for him. I am, especially when the circumstances of the timing of it too kind of screwed him over. Not that it wasn't intentional, but by the time Saban retired, most coaching jobs were kind of filled that a guy like Tommy Reese would take at the college level. What OC jobs were out there for Tommy, And so I think this move makes a lot of sense, Ryan. I'm happy for him. I think this is a good move for him.
Yeah. I think tight ends is one of the ones where you especially, like as a tight end coach, That's one of the ones that you can learn on the fly a little bit easier than a lot of other positions. Because, like you said, you have an offensive line coach to help with the blocking technique. You also have a wide receiver coach that can help with some of the route running stuff. I mean, yeah, I think he'll be a fine tight end coach for the Cleveland Browns. We'll see what's the next step after that, but I think it's a solid situation to be in for sure.
The other part, they say he developed Michael Mayer. I mean, he did. He was the offensive coordinator. He designed his entire game plans around Michael Mayer. I mean, that's part of development.
I think the pushback is the technical side of the game, obviously. But
right, but that's not the NFL, right? I mean, the NFL is not as much about the technical development.
Oh no, I think they're saying that when they hired, it's like, oh, he developed Michael Mayer. And it's like, well,
he definitely played a role in it. And let's not forget the tight ends coach that Michael Mayer played for 2 of his 3 years at Notre Dame, right? Was a guy that Tommy Rees handpicked to come in and be part of the offense, and John McNulty. Sure. So, he that's fair to say. That's fair to say, in my opinion. Good question, Michael. I appreciate that, and appreciate the super chat. We got one from Trevor Rocket.
Trevor says, thank you, Trevor, by the way. Brian and Ryan and all the lads at IB and IB Nation, thank you for all that you do. How excited are you about the potential of the offensive line? Can you each give me one guy you are excited about? Hashtag Lindsey Tough.
This is a good one. Ryan, did you see the discussion we had on the board this weekend about the position groups and ranking the position groups and those type of things? And there were 2 things about it. Number one, I was fired up because in past years, it was very easy to pick the bottom couple position groups. I mean, like going into 2019, it was like, yep, running back is not a strength of this football team. You know what I mean? Like there was years, safety is definitely not a strength of this football team. This year, it's like, who do I put last? I ended up putting tight ends last because of Mitchell Evans' injury, because I need to see him get back, right? And then the other injury history at the position. But like somebody else, I think, had O-line last. And it's just kind of like, number one, it's exciting because there really are no quote unquote weak position groups. But O-line is one of those ones that I had a hard time with because it is one of the few positions where I do think experience matters a lot more than quarterback and O-line to me. And I would say middle linebacker are probably the 3 positions. Let's go 2 on both sides of the ball. Quarterback, O-line, middle line, inside linebacker, safety are the 2 positions where experience adds even greater value than maybe at other positions because of the mental part of the game. And then for O-line, also the physical part of the game. And so they're not going to have a ton of experience on this offensive line, but they're also going to be pretty good size and they're going to be pretty talented. How quickly can they come together? That's the giant question about this football team. So I wouldn't say that I'm necessarily excited about the O-line yet. But to his question was, are you excited about the potential of the O-line? And I'm absolutely excited about the potential of the O-line if we have genuine position battles this offseason. I'm absolutely encouraged by it. So it's got a chance to be very good, but I still have some cautious optimism about the line just because of how inexperienced it is. But the bowl game was a good start because, like, we talked about Florida State getting that kid from Oregon State, right, who is a good football player. Well, he didn't do anything against the offensive line that he'll face right now, and this was their first start together. He didn't do anything. I mean, they controlled
what was a lineman.
Yeah, what's his name? Sione. What's his name? His last name starts with an L. You know what I'm talking about? Kid we liked. He's a solid player. He's a good player for them. Good edge rusher for them. He's a solid player. But like we've seen him against this offensive line. He didn't do anything. Right. They shut him down and they controlled that action. So that was a great first step for me, was watching that game, because we've kind of poo-pooed that victory. Like, you can't read not poo-pooed it. It was a great victory, but like, let's not take too many big picture, views from this game, but the one area where they were only really missing one guy was the D-line. I mean, they had pretty much their D-line intact for that game, and Notre Dame won that battle. That's a good sign. But that's one game where you had a month to prepare. How does a younger group prepare when you've only got 4 or 5 practices to go get ready to play, Purdue, Florida State, Louisville, USC, those type of teams? That's going to be a bigger question mark. But there's a lot of talent there, Ryan. But man, I just have a little bit of nervousness just because of the lack of experience that this group has.
Well, and Trevor, I think when you ask about excitedness about players specifically, I think we all as a collective always clamor towards the young guys that are going to play a little bit, right? I mean, I think it's really every year like Tosh Baker, 60-year senior, excited for it. Like that just doesn't typically happen, right? So it's Charles Jagasaw for me, or the artist formerly known as Charles Jagasaw, because his pronunciation changes every other week. Whatever, conversation for a different day. But Charles at left tackle, I think, is where my optimism starts, because it's not often you lose a talent like Joe Alt at left tackle and you're just like, huh, you got a kid that might be just as talented. I mean, obviously not as seasoned, not as technical, not as nuanced, not as experienced, but from a pure raw talent perspective, I mean, Charles Jagasaw is incredibly gifted. If you flash forward 2 years from now and you're like Charles Jagasaw went top 15 in the NFL draft, to be like, okay, I can see that type of projection for him. He's that talented, right? So he would be one. My dark horse, if I'm throwing out a dark horse, I'm excited to see what the offseason looks like for Sullivan Absher. I'm really interested to see how he fits in, whether they keep him at offensive tackle, whether they move him inside to compete for one of the guard spots, because I think we know, well, we think that Charles Jagasaw is going to have a spot. We think that it's probably going to be Tosh Baker, most likely at right tackle, maybe Emil Wagner if he has a great offseason. We'll see, right? Then you're talking about the guards of the incumbents coming back of Billy Schrouth, and then you have, obviously, at center Ashton Craig, and then Pat Coogan as kind of the incumbent. But I'm really curious to see if that left guard spot specifically is up for competition, and if they were like, Sullivan Absher just might be too good to not throw into that competition. He might be too talented. So I'm interested to see him as a dark horse, but Charles Jagasaw, artist formerly known as Charles Jagasaw. Hopefully he runs with that, by the way. I think that's pretty good branding, but otherwise I think that he has a chance to be an absolute star at left tackle. Hopefully in 2024 as well.
Yeah. Or at least that we see the flashes of it, right? Like that would like, I don't expect him to be as good consistently as Joe Alt was as a sophomore. They're coming from completely different backgrounds, but can he show the dominance where, like, hey, when this kid figures it out, he can be pretty good.
And he can still be a freshman All-American, because he's technically still a redshirt freshman. So,
although not for Notre Dame, because the way that they do it is, which sucks, Notre Dame doesn't have redshirt freshmen. It's all by your class, so they won't nominate a sophomore that we would view as a redshirt freshman for a freshman All-American squad. Doesn't that suck?
Really? That never happened before? I feel like I've seen that. No? Huh.
Not for Notre Dame. Unless people stop looking at Notre Dame that way, because I had this discussion with a guy last year when I was talking to him about I remember who it was. It was like Blake Fisher and somebody else. And they didn't consider him because they aren't listed as redshirt freshmen on the roster.
It's dumb.
Is what it is.
Dumb.
Agree.
John A1, did Kahanu Kia show pass rushing ability before he left for his mission?
I mean, I would assume in practice, he never once rushed the passer in a game. So he didn't play a whole ton that year. He only played, I think, 11 snaps the whole season on defense. He played a lot of special teams that year. So if you go look at Pro Football Focus, they don't have him listed as having any pass, a single pass rush all year. All the stuff was against the run. They must have seen something from him in practice, because they have him listed as a Viper on the depth, or an end on the depth chart. Or on this winter roster, and they wanted him back. So clearly they saw something from him.
What's his weight on the roster?
219, which I don't think that's an accurate. I don't know that's because that's what he was when he left. Maybe it's accurate, but it could have just been, who knows? But they must have showed the coach. He must have showed the coaches something. But he wasn't moved there until the season, and we don't get to see practices during the season, so we haven't seen that. He had some decent pass rush potential, skills on film in high school. He would come off the edge a little bit, but. No, I have no idea what he's going to bring. No idea what he's going to bring.
I think he's there more for the versatility than the pass rush upside, to be honest. It's kind of like Junior Tuihalamaka. I don't think Junior Tuihalamaka is ever going to be a great pass rusher, but could be a versatile movement-based, Viper that can play in space a little bit, can set an edge. Hopefully he's that type of kid.
Yep.
Aiden Benami said, Jadon Blair's dad seems to like Notre Dame a lot. I think we're the favorite. Any idea on his timetable? So Jadon has always been a before senior year guy, and I think he's also been a after official visits guy as well. So you can kind of think towards the end of summer, Aiden would potentially be the timetable. Is Notre Dame the leader? I'm not sure if I would say that, but I also wouldn't really say, like, I think Penn State's done a really good job with him, for instance. He's looking at some of the like Carolina schools, but like overall, I'm not sure I would say a team is the perceived leader for Jadon Blair. I would say there's kind of a top group, the Penn States, Notre Dame's, the Clemson's, like those types of schools are kind of in the ballpark for Jadon Blair right now. Does Notre Dame have a chance? Yes. I think Notre Dame has a very good chance at Jadon Blair if they do take a third safety in the class, which I think they are obviously very interested in doing because they think Jadon is that good of a football player. So Notre Dame will be in it until the end. Family likes Notre Dame a lot. You mentioned Jay, obviously his dad really likes Notre Dame. Jadon Blair, more importantly though, outside the family thing, is that Jadon also really likes Notre Dame. Every time he's been in Notre Dame, it's been big time. He saw Notre Dame multiple times last year, even on the road against some opponents that he was visiting. Mm-hmm. I think Notre Dame certainly has a very good chance at Jadon Blair in the end.
I would say Notre Dame, Penn State, and Florida State probably in that order would be the in my opinion, of the top three for him. And I think Notre Dame and Penn State probably, from what I'm told, are probably the top two teams right now. But his dad said that they're going to get back for either a spring or an official, maybe a spring and an official, perhaps moving forward. Both. So we'll see.
Christopher Galloway, Coach, can you explain the Viper position, which the depth and size that we have, and defensive end and defensive tackle? Why don't we go on the defensive line?
Go big on the defensive
line. Go big
line.
on defensive. I got it. Yep.
Well, I mean, look, there's tons of ways to be successful. Number one, and everybody's always clamoring for why don't you be like this team or why don't you be like that team? And you got to be who you are. And if you can get the skill set you want in a bigger package, sure, okay, go for it. But I don't think Notre Dame this past season, right? I mean, I don't know that I could watch a game and say, boy, they got beat that game because they didn't have the size to hold up at a position. In the past, we've seen that, right? I mean, we've seen in past years where they just were just too small. I'm not concerned about that with the current team, because the issues in the past were not only were they light, Ryan, but they lacked length as well. And that's a bad combination on the D-line. When you're light and not long, that's a bit of an issue in my opinion. But, when I look at it, Ryan, when you talk about can you explain the Viper position? It's a weak side end position. Boundary end, I shouldn't say weak side. It's a boundary end position. I shouldn't say weak side because a lot of teams will put their tight end to the boundary. So that, depending on how you call strength, if you call formation strength, you call tight end strength, there's a lot of different ways that people will do it. But essentially, it's a position that has to be versatile. You have to be stout enough to hold up against the run. It certainly has important edge setting principles, whether that is, and setting the edges can be one of two things. You can be a force player or a spill player. A force player means you want to come higher on the outside shoulder of the guy you're taking on because you want to force the ball back inside. A spill player is you're going to come more narrow, eat up the inside cutback lane and force it to spill outside. And they'll do both with that. Normally with Notre Dame, they like to force with the Viper, but you've got to be stout against the run. You've got to be quick enough to get off the ball, take on pullers, blow up pullers with the proper technique, meaning not technique like arm technique. That's always important, but technique from, am I spilling? Am I forcing and thinking on that way? Because if you're supposed to force inside and you get caught low, and they bounce it, you don't have help outside. If you're supposed to spill, but you get caught high and they cut up inside, you may not have inside help. So that's an important piece of it. You've got to be able to drop into coverage and play it at the very least flats to hook curl. Got to at least be able to do that. You've got to have the ability to run with a running back in space. We see Notre Dame do that with their Vipers quite often. We saw even with Isaiah Foskey. And you've got to be able to rush the quarterback for this position to really be the strength that it needs to be. You've got to be. It's a very multiple position. It's a lot more diverse than the defensive end position, the big end position. That position is primarily run and pass rush. This is a run, pass rush, and coverage position. I think in a perfect world, they'd like to have a linebacker type that can also stack in sort of a 3-3 look in certain situations. I think is something that this staff would like to be able to do at times. At least Marcus Freeman would like to be able to do at times. I don't know that we've seen as much of that from Al Golden, but That's kind of what you like. What kind of size? I mean, if I could draw a perfect Viper in a lab, he would be about 6'4", about 255, 260 pounds with 34 plus inch arms and a great first step. Like that's what I would like to see. That would be a perfect in a lab type of guy, but you don't have to be that guy to be effective. You can be shorter if you have length. You can be longer. You can be lighter as long as you can play with power. But that would be the ideal thing. And as far as the other thing too is, look, it's hard. Look, there's a reason that Notre Dame and even Ohio State to a degree have a little bit undersized defensive lines when you compare to Georgia and Alabama, and that's because there just aren't as many kids like that in the North that are big time football players, and you've got to develop it to a degree. Michigan's been able to figure out a way to do it. They got Kenneth Grant from Indiana, but then they got Mason Graham from California. But I just think that's the style of play that Michigan wants. Their inside guys have to be big, physical run stuffers. That's not the defense Notre Dame plays. So it has to fit what you're doing. That's going to be the big key. But it's good question. Good question. And this is actually a similar question. John A1 says, why does the staff like MLB body types at the Viper position? I don't think that's accurate. I think that there are certain players that fit that mold, but like Josh Burnham is not he's got as much Viper body type as he does middle linebacker. I mean, he's 6'4", with really long arms and a frame to be 250, 260. That's Viper frame. He just ran like a linebacker and obviously could play linebacker, but I don't think I wouldn't say that they looked at him as a middle linebacker type. I don't believe that they would recruit Junior Tuihalamaka today to play that position. I think it's just kind of like they liked him a linebacker and that was where the need was. There was a greater need there. Dominic Kulak, for example, is not being recruited to play Viper. He's being recruited to play a bit of a hybrid position. So I think the premise is a little bit off. Just because that's what they've done so far doesn't mean that's what they like. What they like is a 6'4", long, Damian Shanklin type, Boubacar Traore type of player. That's Logan Thomas type of player. That's the guys they're recruiting to play Viper. Again, Dominic Kulak not being recruited to play Viper. Viper is a part of the bigger money position that they have, which has to do a lot of different things. But the pure Viper, if you look at what Notre Dame has recruited since Marcus Freeman has got here, the guys they've recruited to play Viper are 6'4"-ish, long arm, twitchy edge players. Just because Botelho and Junior and Burnham have done that so far, that was more of a byproduct of who they had and what the needs were. Like I would say this, Ryan, I think Junior Tuihalamaka and or Josh Burnham would have gotten a longer look, especially Junior, would have gotten a longer look at Mike linebacker if the Viper depth chart wasn't so awful after Isaiah Foskey. Like you had Jordan Botelho, who wasn't even playing the position prior to 2020. I mean, he played Rover in 2021. Who else was going to play Viper? You had to move guys there. You had to. And so I think that's a big reason why Junior moved, is because who else was going to play that position? You know, and same thing. And Josh Burnham's a little bit different because Josh is built more like what they want at a Viper. Even though he was a linebacker in high school, he's 6'4", long arms, kind of twitchy. He has more of that skill set. He fits more physically the Logan Thomas types, the Boubacar types, than does Junior or Botelho. Those were necessity moves, in my opinion, that I don't know that they would have made as early as they did had the depth chart not just been so bad at Viper behind Isaiah Foskey. That's my overall thoughts on it, Ryan.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I don't think that they're the prototype, but I would say also this, John, is that Viper can function a couple different ways, potentially, right? Like there are the true Viper types that they're recruiting that are true edges, true guys that you're going to try to get pass rush upside, to play on the edge a ton, work the point of attack. But then there are some roles at times for a Viper that is more of a versatile player that can drop into coverage, that can work, a little bit more outside, almost like a 3-4 outside linebacker alignment at times, depending on certain looks. Like versatility is a big plus there in a certain situation, but I would agree with Brian that like ideally you would like to be longer and bigger at that spot than just a true Mike body type, right? Like it's pretty practical. You know, you want a certain skill set as a coach, but ultimately you would love that skill set to be in a bigger body, because football is still a big man's game at the end of the day. Like, you would still like that, but there are needs out of necessity, obviously, that happens.
So Ryan, one of the questions that was asked as you were leaving, and I was done with it before you came back, and it was kind of a prequel to this one, was about, you know, can you explain the Viper? And my point was, my answer was essentially, the difference between like Viper and the edge is obviously you've got to be good at setting the edge, whether that's force or spill. You've got to be good at pass rush. But the big difference between those two positions, besides just one's boundary, one is field, is there's a lot more versatility desired from the Viper. Can you drop, the very least, they want a Viper that can drop flats and then hook to curl. At the very least, they want that. Clark Lee did that as well. I mean, remember one of the biggest plays of the 2018 game against Michigan was Julian Okwara undercutting an outcut and picking it off along the sideline. Right. Like, so even Clark Lee did some of that stuff. So, but if I could draw up that player in a lab, he's at least 6'4", he's got at least 34-inch arms, and he's probably got a 250 to 260 frame and a great first step. Like, so that's what they want, is that kind of guy that can also drop into coverage. That's why they like Boubacar. That's why they like Logan Thomas as much as they do. Cause you're talking about a kid with, you know, potentially having 4 or 5 speed at 6'4" with super long arms, right? That eventually will grow into that kind of player. Damian Shanklin can be that kind of guy, although he's more of he's got a little bit more of a power profile to him than like Logan Thomas does. So there's some different types, but they are going to say, hey, look, like you and I sat there and watched it against Syracuse, like sitting side by side right in front of us, Isaiah Foskey opening up and running on wheel routes with Sean Tucker, right? Like there is, even a guy like Foskey, there's something to that. Now they're not going to drop that guy and say, hey, go get over top. We're going to go 3-man, and we want you to jam and reroute and then open up and run with Brock Bowers up the seam. They're not going to do that with no help. They're not going to do that. But there needs to be a bit of that to the table. And to your point, but that doesn't mean that they want a 6'2", 250-pound guy at that position. That's not the desire, right? Because if they wanted Dominic Kulak to be a Viper, they just would be recruiting him at Viper. But they're not. They're recruiting him for a hybrid position. The guy they're recruiting as a full-time Viper is listed between 6'4" and 6'5", and he's about 230 pounds, and he's an edge player in Damian Shanklin. And so that's the desired position. But they're smart enough to say, hey, look, we don't have that guy right now. And so Junior can help us there. Burnham can help us there. Patelho can help us there. And let's get those guys over there until the guys we've recruited are ready to play that position.
Plus, your linebacker depth chart is pretty healthy as well, so you can afford to make those distinctions and switches.
Absolutely.
Patrick Fitzgerald question: are there any general changes you're looking at Marcus Freeman to make in terms of his in-game coaching for the upcoming season?
Not so much from the head coach type of in-game decision-making, Ryan. I mean, look, I don't know that I know enough about Marcus Freeman's in-game decision-making to say this is who he is and this is what I would change. I mean, there have been decisions that I have not agreed with, but I think overall he shows a healthy willingness to, you know, utilize 4th down analytics, but not obsess over them, right? Yeah. I think that's something we've seen where it's like, okay, they're going for it on 4th down here. That's good. But not in one of those like, okay, it's okay to kind of take the field goal here type of situation, right? So I think there's that healthy balance in sort of his 4th down decision making, in my opinion. You know, Notre Dame this past season, I mean, they didn't attempt a lot of 4th downs. 110. The teams that led the country this year were in the 40s. I don't ever want to see Notre Dame in the 40s and 4th down attempts. You know what I mean? Like, because that means you're not overly efficient and you're getting yourself into more 4th downs than I'd want you to be in, but. You know, I mean, look, there were some times he attempted field goals that I don't think he should have attempted, but you have a kid with an incredible leg. Okay, let's get points. And so, I mean, it's some nitpicks here and there, but I don't know that there's been enough consistency from year 1 to year 2 for me to say this is who Marcus Freeman is with this type of in-game decision-making process. Plus, they blew so many people out this year, Ryan, that it's like we didn't really get a chance to see him make those type of decisions. And so, you know, and then once you kind of get into games, more of the issues are more about, gee, I didn't like that play call. I didn't like this coverage call or whatever. Those aren't necessarily coaching in-game decisions. It's more of we're going for it on 4th down here or not. You know, like you could question some of the 4th down decisions against Ohio State, but I actually liked those. It showed me, you know what I mean? Like, yeah, because it's hindsight, Ryan. Look, hindsight 2020. If you kick that first field goal, okay, sure. But what if you convert a 4th and 1 and you go down and score and take a 7-0 lead, right? Like, I don't like doing the hindsight 2020. If you didn't like it at the time, then you can criticize it afterwards. I liked it at the time. You had a good drive going.
I still would have went for it. I still would have went for it.
You had a good drive going. It was a 4th and 1. You were getting good movement. Okay, it didn't work out. You got to execute. Now, you could say, hey, I didn't necessarily love that call, or the quarterback's got to make a better effort to get the sticks. That's my bigger criticism right there, is the quarterback's got to have more field awareness and be willing to kind of say, I'm going to lower my shoulder and get this first down. So there's always, I mean, there's always some but that's true for everybody. There's always some I mean, people are up in arms about Dan Campbell not taking field goals yesterday. And I get it, but like, that's who he is, right? I mean, we have evidence of that's who he is. You can debate whether it's right or wrong. My point is, I think that you have to be who you are. And in Marcus Freeman's case, what I like about him is he is willing to go for a 4th down, even in big games, but he's not so in love with analytics that he's going to be making those type of decisions, in my opinion.
Right.
I think so. That's kind of where I'm at with it. Like, if Notre Dame, it was down 17-14 in the middle of the 3rd quarter to Ohio State, would they have gone for it on 4th and 1 in that situation? Based on what we've seen from Marcus Freeman, probably not. Probably ties the game up. Probably takes the points, ties the game up. But drive 1. So those are the things I would see, Ryan. More of my issues with Marcus Freeman are going to still come down to the culture. You know what I mean? Like, can he get this team ready to play at a certain level from a focus standpoint, a passion standpoint, and a technical standpoint with more consistency from what we've seen? And can he get his teams a little bit more ready in some of the big games? Because, like, that's the weird thing. We saw in 2022, the knock was his teams were physically and emotionally ready to play in the big games. I thought they were physically and emotionally ready to play against Ohio State. They were physically and emotionally ready to play against North Carolina, which was a big game for a lot of different reasons. They were that way against Clemson. They were that way against USC. Now, they didn't win all those games, but you never looked at like they didn't want to be here today. They were that way against like UNLV on offense, and Stanford and Marshall to a degree, and Cal. It's like, guys, like they were more than fired up, ready to play BYU in Las Vegas, right? This year's kind of the opposite. They just steamrolled those lesser teams, but then a couple of those big games, you're like, do you guys even want to be here today? So it's weird. Like, it was two different teams, right? So I don't know which one is Marcus Freeman.
Louisville was really bad. Yeah,
Duke was that way. Clemson was that way. I mean, where you just weren't emotionally ready to play that game. It was the opposite story in 2022. So we're going to find out in year 3. And I got an article out today, Ryan, and you probably haven't a chance to read it yet because I published it like kind of a little bit before we started the show. But the premise was, this is year 3 under Marcus Freeman. And we'll probably talk about that a little bit during the week. We're going to learn more about who he is in these situations that Patrick's answering this year than we have the last 2 years for a couple reasons. Number one is he's evolving and learning who he is as a coach and what he actually likes in situations. And number two is your third-year team, and part of the reason year 3 is so important is because year 3 is going to have much more of your DNA throughout the team than years 1 and year 2. And that's going to be a big part of it. I think we'll have a much better idea of who he is in this type of in-game stuff now than I think we did in the first 2 years, in my opinion, Ryan.
Yeah, I mean, I think the stuff that you criticize head coaches for in the game is always usage of timeouts, clock management, obviously associated with the usage of timeouts. It's your aggressiveness to go for it in 4th down and 4 down territory. And I think it's just an approach, in certain moments of the game as far as being aggressive or being passive. I haven't had too many concerns. Like, the only thing I would say is that maybe there's a slightly passive approach to, end of game half type situations at points. I mean, like the end of the Duke game, for instance, where you hear the clip back where he's just like, set up for a field goal, where you're just like, dude, no, that's not what I want us to be doing right now.
Right.
And so maybe
especially
a little bit more
at
of
that time of the season when Spencer Schrader was struggling, Ryan. Like, that's the other thing too. Is like a month later, maybe our opinion changes of that because you have a pretty good. Right. But even still, like I'm with you. And there's been a couple times I've been like, from a time management standpoint, there's like, going for it on 4th down when you were down, 21-10 with 9 minutes left against Louisville. Like, that wasn't a smart decision, but you could at least understand why he did it.
Right.
And that's the big thing for me is if I'm going to disagree with your decision, there's two ways of looking at it. One is that's just a stupid decision. And another one is I don't mind the decision. I mean, I don't like the decision, but I get it. Like Brian Kelly going for 2 against Northwestern when you just scored to go up 11 was a stupid decision. There's no justifying going for 2 there. None, in my opinion. You know, Brian Kelly going for 2 if they were only up, I don't know, 9 or 10. I mean, okay, I wouldn't have done it there, but I get it, right? Like, so there's sometimes where the decision is just so dumb that you're just like the decision against Tulsa in 2010. You're in field goal range. You have the most accurate kicker in football that year, and you're in easy range for him for David Ruffer. You've got a true freshman quarterback who came in the game late second quarter to replace your injured starter. He doesn't have a very strong arm, and you want to roll out, throw a deep ball into the end zone with him. That's a stupid decision that there's no justifying that one. You know what I mean? Other times you're like, you know what? I wouldn't have made that call there, but I get it. Like for all the criticism for Jared Parker had on the last drive, it's kind of like if he hits that screen, the game's over, right? Like it required the kid from Ohio State to make a good play. However, even though like I get the call, I don't like it, but I got it. That's a different conversation than what the freaking heck are you doing throwing the ball here when if you run it, the game's over. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like those are different. I mean, it's just you're going to do things, guys, you disagree with, Ryan. It's just, can you at least understand why? That's where I try to be as when I evaluate those type of decisions.
I didn't even hate the screen pass that Parker threw on that last drive. I disliked the taking Audric Estime out of the game after he just run for a first down and was bludgeoning the Ohio State defense. That was my criticism on that final drive.
And you were just really starting to lean on them too, man. Like your O-line was leaning on them, you know. And the other thing too is it was also what was bad about it. And I don't know if we've ever talked about this. It showed me poor scouting of your opponent. Because the one thing about the kid that made those plays in the last drive, that's what he's done the last 2 years. He is he may not play well in this game against Maryland or that game against Indiana, but JT tends to play very well in big games, but he's been a very clutch, key situation player. And to me, you got to account for him when you're going to run the football in that situation. He's not the end that you leave unblocked and try to kick out with Pat Coogan. You know what I'm saying? Right. Like that was just poor opponent awareness in that situation that you could criticize again, but that's an OC criticism, not a head coaching criticism. Right. You know, I mean, run your offense. So I think we'll have a much better idea of who he is. Because I mean, do you feel like you know who Marcus Freeman is? Like, do you know exactly, what goes into his head for fourth quarter decisions and things like that? And like I think the overall passiveness on offense in big games is something that I've criticized, but that's not an in-game decision. You prepared that way during the week. That's a bigger concern than I have than some of his in-game stuff. Boy, Ryan, we're getting some really good questions today, man. Sparking some really good conversation. I'm enjoying this one so far. There was a fun one down here, Ryan, that I just thought was great. I want to read this one from Salty. He says the Irish caught a lot of heat for having 10 men on the field for the last 2 plays in the Ohio State game. When Kingston Viliama-Asa is on the field, will Notre Dame have to play 10 just to make it fair? So,
good player, man.
Jaden Greathouse is this guy on offense, and we now know who Salty's guy is on defense. It is Kingston.
It's a good pick. It's a good pick to have. Yes.
Got another one that I want to read, Ryan, because this is for you. Says Salty also asks, Ryan, how does participation in the Senior Bowl or East-West Shrine Bowl benefit or hurt players' NFL prospects? In-game performance is obvious, but is there more?
Well, Salty, for the All-Star process, there's a lot that goes into it. I mean, no one cares about the game, right? Like, let's get that out of the way. No one cares about what you do in the Senior Bowl on Saturday. No one cares about what you did on the Shrine Bowl during the actual football game. They care about getting you in practice and isolating you against some of the other top players in the country and seeing how you perform. And, the one-on-ones specifically are a big thing that scouts are going to watch because they want to see. You can't hide in that situation, right? What does your body look like? How long are you? What do you look like coming off the football? What is your pass rush plan and your process? What is as a route runner? What is your ability to find the blind spots and coverage and be able to get sync and get out of your breaks quickly? you're in a lot of one-on-one situations in bowl week in the All-Star games, and they want to see you isolate. They want to isolate your traits and see how you stack up against other some of your better peers in the class. So that's the big part. The other big part is the ability to sit down with these coaches and these players that are going to be there. These coaches and the scouts that are going to be on sites. Because sitting down with these scouts, they're going to ask you, and it's a little bit limited compared to what the combine gives you a little bit more of a window to be able to talk to these players, but you're going to get the availability to ask them a lot of hard questions, right? To get to know them personally. And that's the part that's lost in just watching the game film, right? Like I can watch a film of a player a million times and have an opinion of them. And even you can even have preconceived notions about them as a person. Like I could watch a defensive end, for instance, that plays with great motor, and you kind of have a perception of like, man, I bet you when he's not on the field, he's just this super locked in, laser focused dude that is relentless. Like you can just guess a personality. But then you meet him in person, you're just like, maybe a couple red flags there, right? So you can get some personal perspective on players. You can obviously get the background perspective, whether it's, an arrest in the past, whether it's medical stuff, whether it's how he dealt with coaching changes. There's a lot from a personal perspective that you can gain. But more than anything, your scouts are really watching to isolate them in practice against some of their peers, because that's usually when the cream does rise to the crop in this type of situations. You're also getting verified measurables as well. I think literally the Senior Bowl is posting them probably as we speak, as of right now, as far as what some guys are measuring in as so it's a checklist, man. There's a big resume building process right now happening.
Ryan, I have been told this in the past, and I don't know if I've asked you this before on the show. I think I may have, but I've been told in the past that there are some scouts and decision makers that will leave before the games.
Oh yeah, barely anybody stays for the game.
Right.
Barely anybody.
It's the week of practice. It's the interviews. It's that stuff that matters.
It's the fans. The fans stay for the game, and people watch on TV. But the scouts and the people that are there covering it from evaluation perspective, they don't care about the game at all.
Let me ask you this question, and I don't know the answer to this question. Obviously, a good game can cement a good week, right? But if a guy has if a guy has a great week and then plays great in a game, it just it cements it. He had a great week, right? Can a performance in a game like this change your opinion on the week? I don't know the answer. Like if you don't have a very good week and you dominate the game, or if you have a great week and then let's say you're a receiver and you have a great week and then you drop 3 balls in the game, that has no bearing whatsoever.
Not to me, and I've never personally talked to a scout that was like, man, really good practice, but like the game sucked, man. Like he just not good. Like no one talks about the game.
Is that because they already have game film? Like, hey, guy dropped 2 balls in the Senior Bowl, but he never dropped a pass as a senior. I don't care as much about that. Is that
they already have the game film on that side of things. They have the practice film, which is the most important part. And I mean, you're taught as an evaluator, like one game does not make an evaluation at the end of the day anyway, right? So, I just had personally never heard anybody be like, man, he played really poorly in that East-West Shrine Bowl that day. Like,
I truly didn't know. I just was curious. Like, I know they leave before the game, but I didn't know if it was like because they don't care about the game or
I don't even think because like they make the Senior Bowl film available, the actual game afterwards. I'll say this, I've never broken down all 22 of the Senior Bowl. As far as like the actual game practice,
I know you break down like every rep in practice. I've had
all the one-on-ones, all the inside run, like that type of stuff. Like, yes, absolutely. Every rep from practice pretty much. But like the game, I've never broken down the all 22 of the actual Senior Bowl. Never done that. And I've never talked to a scout that does either. Like I've never, because who wins the MVPs every year? It's usually like Isaiah Pede and like dudes like that, where you're just like, all right, man. Sure. Let's go with Isaiah Pede as the MVP. I'm pretty sure Desmond Ridder won it 2 years ago. It's just all right.
Herbert did win it though, right? His year, didn't he?
Herbert
didn't he win it?
There's always some good ones.
But that's not why he was drafted in the top 10, right? I mean, it wasn't Senior Bowl MVP.
Yeah.
It's good stuff. All right, let's get to some more here, Ryan. We have some more great questions from the audience.
Johnny one says, has short yardage run game efficiency changed the value of shorter interior defensive linemen? Are the more in demand in situational football?
I'll let you kind of answer that one, Ryan, because I just think it's.
I think it's a leverage thing in general. Yeah. It's a leverage thing in general. I would say this, John. Size, yes, I think that overall, just good size is definitely something that you want to defend against, the efficiency of the run game, especially the short yardage, because you want guys that are able to maintain their leverage in short spaces. You don't want guys that can get displaced out of gaps, obviously, and be able to get moved off the line of scrimmage, off of their spot. But I don't think it's necessarily a height thing, right? Like, I don't think it's a short versus tall thing, because we've talked about it before, but like, there's some really tall defensive linemen that play with great leverage. Like, I care more about consistent leverage and size if I'm talking about stopping the run personally on defense.
So, John, I think I think it's more of the skill set that's looked for in those situations tends to be more about quickness and the ability to penetrate. And it just so happens that in certain instances, it's a shorter, smaller player that's that way. The shortness comes with the smallness more so than they want to recruit the next Howard Cross. Notre Dame would like to recruit the next Howard Cross from a quickness, length, leverage, motor, technique standpoint in a 6'4", 295-pound package. That's what they would prefer.
They want it to look like Jason Onye.
Right.
Yeah.
They love the motor. They love the skills and all that, but it's not like, hey, let's go find the next 6 foot, 275-pound guy. That's not what they're looking for. I think it just so happens that, okay, we want a penetrator. We want a guy that's quick. We want a guy that can block destruct. We want a guy that can get in the backfield, blah, 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 blah. And that just tends to be the 6'2", 285 guy over the 6'5", 330 guy in situational football. So I would say it's more that than a desire to find the 6'2", 280-pound guy. That would be my takeaway on that one.
Next question was another one from John. It says, with the loss of Chris Tyree and Tobias Merriweather, which players best serve as field stretchers? Well, I think of players that have been added to this roster, Brian, I would say two guys that are newcomers that could potentially provide instant field stretching ability. Outside of I guess you'll throw like Jordan Faison in there, right? Like some pre-existing guys. But of the guys that are coming in, I would say Chris Mitchell, the transfer from Florida International, and Cam Williams are probably the two guys I look at and say, those are probably outside field stretchers, potentially, if they're able to make an impact in 2024, which expect at least one of them to be able to. So
I've been told Jaden Harrison's a 4-3 guy.
Yeah.
And so obviously there's some speed elements to him. You see it in the return game, but with him, we just haven't seen it at receiver a ton. At least we didn't this year. Mm-hmm. It's been more evident in the return game for him than it has in the past. I mean, as a junior in 2022, he only averaged 7.9 yards per catch. He averaged 11.2 in 2021. And so in this past year was his best at 14.6. Can he bring that on offense? I don't know. I think Deion Colsey brings the ability to stretch the field in a different type. Not so much that he's a burner 4-3 guy, but he is fast for his size, and he's so long that he can get kind of over the top where even if you're on him, he can still be open if you have a quarterback that knows how to throw the ball up and to go get it. So Deion, if healthy, would be another guy that would bring a little bit of that element to the table as well, in my opinion. And as far as just stretching the field from a vertical standpoint, there are some other guys like Jaden Greathouse. To me, is a guy that has the potential to be a field stretcher on more of a horizontal standpoint with his route running and size, and then the speed that he does possess. Those are guys that can like that could be impactful. But if we're talking vertical stretch, which is what I perceive the question to be, I think you nailed it. Chris Mitchell, Cam Williams, Jordan Faison to a degree, although Jordan Faison's more quick than he is fast. He just gets downhill in a hurry. But we saw it against was it Pitt on the touchdown pass that Jaden Greathouse caught on the deep over. That play worked because Jordan Faison was able to take the top off the defense with his backside post route. If you get into that post route slower, then the timing's off, and the safety sees Jaden Greathouse and he closes on it. I mean, that's the he'll come down the safety, the corner will stay over top. But because he ate up that secondary coverage, I mean, because that's the other big part of stretching the field. Sometimes stretching the field isn't you're not even getting the ball. It's can you take the top off of the coverage that then opens up those other opportunities. So you get a 40-yard touch. And that's the kind of stuff where I think Jaden Greathouse can be a big play guy, is that type of stuff. He's not going to be a guy that just goes out there and runs a bunch of goes and posts the way that Tobias Merriweather or maybe a Chris Tyree did, where he just runs by people. There's different types of way. And that just leads into I just like the diversity of this receiving corps so much better than last year's group, Ryan. I really do. And I think they also have some guys that can stretch the field at tight end and running back this year that they didn't necessarily have this year. Like Mitchell Evans is not a stretch the field tight end, more so than Michael Mayer, but he's not going to, where Eli Reardon, I think, can be when he's healthy. Like, and then of course I can't wait to see. Well, I shouldn't. I say can't. I really hope that they find some ways to use Jeremiah Love as that type of player as well, Ryan, to create some big plays in the pass game. Really would.
We had a question from Buddy Gabrick. Thank you so much. Who would be your 4-man class if you guys were the head coach of this with the current board? 2025 wide receivers.
So if I could put together the perfect 4-man class,
how realistic does it have to be? I guess would be my first
let's do realistic. It's guys that Notre Dame has a legitimate shot at. So like my 2024 receiver class is not Jeremiah Smith, Michael Hudson, Cam Williams, and Cam Coleman, right? I mean, like a realistic.
I was more curious about the 8 guys that they've been offering over the last couple of weeks because like it's kind of hard to tell how realistic some of them are at the moment, you know.
So let's say, Ryan, if a kid has been offered and there has been some level of interest shown, meaning that guy, if you stay on him, you could win him in the end. So if you wanted to include Michael Terry or Lex Cyrus, for example, Nas Newkirk, you can include them. We're not going to include like Jamie French right now because unless he gets back on campus for another visit, like Notre Dame, I mean, I don't view them as a player for them. Is that fair? That's so I have a Notre Dame fan 4 and then a analyst 4. And I'll give my analyst 4 first. It's Taylon Taylor, it's Dalen McCutcheon, it's Quincy Porter, and it's Elijah Burris would be my 4. If you were to take Lex Cyrus and replace him with one of those, I would be fine with that. But that would be my 4. If you were to say replace Derek Meadows for Quincy Porter, I'd be fine with that too. Derek Meadows has loads of talent. I've expressed my concerns about him when comparing the two. But I'd be fine with Derek Meadows as part of that 4 as well. My Notre Dame fan 4 would be Jerome Bettis Jr., because I just want to have Jerome Bettis' kid here. And I really hope that the DNA kicks in at some point in time and he blossoms. That would be kind of my hope, because that'd be pretty awesome. And then it would be 3 of the other 4 that I talked about. But the one that to me is, if I'm really talking about building a game-changing receiving class, I think it has to have 2 of a trio of Taylon Taylor, Dalen McCutcheon, and Lex Cyrus. It has to have 2 of those 3 in it, because those, to me, guys, right now, for different reasons, that truly are game changers. Like Elijah Burris, right? You know, I'm very high on him, but he's still a little bit of a projectable guy. And I don't know that I'd call him a game. He's more route runner, get open, right? He's like that kind of guy that's just like, he's more Cooper Kupp, not similar skill set, but like he's more impact the game like Cooper Kupp. It's the first name to pop in my head. Whereas, you know, some other kid is more Percy Harvin or Will Fuller. You know what I mean? Like it's more of that. So I think McCutcheon, Taylon Taylor, and Cyrus, to truly have a needle-moving, game-changing, holy crap, Notre Dame is not playing around, I think you need 2 of those 3 guys. What would your 4 be?
My ideal 4 would be Taylon Taylor. It would be Derek Meadows with some realism attached. Those 2, I would love Dalen McCutcheon, and I would like Lex Cyrus would be my ideal 4. Because I think that all 4 of those bring very unique skill sets to the table that are different. Derek Meadows has to be 6'6" at this point. He has to be. After watching a few of the clips, he has to be 6'6". You just don't have a ton of guys that look like him.
Fast.
Like he's legit 4.5 flat fast at 6'6". That kid is a freak show talent athletically. So that kid combined with Taylon, who's a little bit more of the explosive, but also route running upside, can work outside the numbers, could work in the slot at times. He's kind of your multi-level threat as far as a field wide receiver. And then Dalen McCutcheon, I kind of feel similar-ish, but like I like him a whole lot in the slot as a guy that can really manipulate space. And then Lex Cyrus is just for the speed. I mean, like he can manipulate space, he can do things after the catch, but that kid is a legitimate, I mean, he runs 10 400 meter. That kid's probably a 4.3 something athlete. Like he can fly. So that would be ideal. But I mean, honestly, like you have a good shot with Taylon Taylor. You have a really good shot with Derek Meadows. You also will have a shot with Dalen McCutcheon if you push for Dalen McCutcheon.
Right.
And I think that, I mean, we'll see, but like Cyrus has said some good things about Notre Dame early. I mean, we'll see if they can get him on a visit, but like that's not unrealistic, I don't think, at this point.
He would be the most unrealistic of the ones we've mentioned.
Yeah.
But as you said, Ryan, he has expressed some early interest in Notre Dame, in my view. So yeah, I get it.
We'll
That'd be either one of those I'd be very, very happy with.
Yeah.
Very happy.
Like I would love Michael Terry. I think that getting a guy like a Lex Cyrus to potentially look at Notre Dame, who's a Pennsylvania kid, comparative to Michael Terry, where he is in that recruit. I mean, because I think he's about to take a visit to like Oregon, and like I just would need to see that kid take a visit to Notre Dame before I consider him even slightly realistic. So,
Agree.
We'll see.
Agree very much with that.
Seek and destroy. Hannah Hidalgo is the best freshman to ever play at Notre Dame women's basketball.
That is a very good question. I mean, certainly the best scorer. There's no doubt about that. I mean, her ability to. I mean, she just
like
set
20
the freshman
of a game, right?
I mean, like well into the 20s, and you know, she's shown the ability to score in big moments. I mean, she just dropped 34 on UConn, and this isn't like a vintage UConn team, Ryan, but like it's still a top 10 UConn team.
Sure.
So, you know, I mean, she's outstanding. And the thing is she's also not someone she's not just a scorer. I mean, she had 11 rebounds the other night too, and she's not very big. She's kind of short, you know what I mean? And so, but she's a good rebounder. She's already had a triple double this season. I think she ranks like pretty high in the nation, and from what I've read, in steals. I mean, like
she went to Paul VI. I literally coached track at Paul VI here in New Jersey. I had no idea she went to Paul VI.
She didn't have any steals against UConn, but in the game 3, 3, 6, 7, 4, 4, 3, 7, 5, 7, 6, 4. So like they played at Tennessee earlier in the year, and she had 13 points, 7 rebounds, 7 assists, and 4 points. She only shot 5 of 17 from the field, but she impacted that game in a big way because she's not just a scorer. Against UConn, 34 points, 10 rebounds, 6 assists. Like that's someone who's impacting the game in a beyond just the scoring aspect of it. Now, at the same time, Skylar Diggins didn't score like she did. She's not the scorer that she was, but she also played on a different type of team, you know, with a much more balanced, spreading type of thing. And she was a different type of player. Skylar was pretty good too as a freshman, from what I can remember. And Enrique, if I remember correctly, was a really good scorer as a freshman as well. But I could be remembering her freshman season and confusing with her sophomore season. So let me go look real quick. No, yeah, I'm confusing with her sophomore season. She was at 15.9 as a sophomore. She's only 11.4 as a freshman. So I'm confusing those two seasons. But of my lifetime, like I don't remember what Ruth Riley was as a freshman. The first time I ever saw Ruth Riley play was her senior year when Notre Dame won the title. So I couldn't tell you that. And there's some former players from back in the day that you know. But as my life, like since I've been following Notre Dame the last 20 years, she's got a chance. She's got to finish the year out, right? I mean, because at Notre Dame you're gauged on winning in women's basketball, kind of like you are in football. And that's why that game the other night was so big, because this team has been kind of, you know, good, but not as good as you'd hoped. I mean, they got smacked by South Carolina. They've lost 2 to Syracuse. You know, I mean, they've been good, but just not like holy moly, lights out good. You know, lost to North Carolina at home, and you know, you needed to see them kind of get that big win. And now you've got a road win over Tennessee and a road win over UConn. If you can build on that and make a deep run in the tournament, then sure, because that's ultimately what you're gauged on. But yeah, that girl is fun to watch, dude, and she is. I mean, she's fast. She can shoot. She's a much better shooter than Olivia Miles. That's like they have a very similar game with the ball in their hands. Like, you know, attack the rim, score at the bucket, distribute. Olivia is not to me as good of a defender as Hannah, and she's not nearly the scorer that Hannah is, in my opinion. And a big part of that's because Hannah can just shoot so effectively. I mean, she's a pretty good shooter as well. So she's outstanding. She's really good. Really, really good.
I don't think anybody's shocked in the chat that a person from New Jersey is a very good athlete. It's just crazy. Crazy that happens. South Jersey as well. She's from Haddonfield as well. Yeah. All the 6.
Somebody in the chat too said that Skylar had a better surrounding cast. Not so much on her freshman team. I don't know that her freshman team was quite as good. But some of her later teams were obviously much better. But the other thing too is this team we have not seen this version, like, and we won't now that they announced Olivia Miles isn't playing this year. But like Sonia Citron has been hurt, and she's now back, but she's playing with a big old brace. Emma Risch is out. So there's been some injuries on this team too. We haven't really got a chance to see this team at its peak, which is going to be interesting. But when you're a true freshman and you play the schedule that Notre Dame plays, and you are scoring 24.4 points per game, you're 5'6", you're scoring 24.4 points per game, you're 6.6 rebounds per game, you've got 5.6 assists per game, and you're averaging 5.1 steals per game and only 3.7 turnovers. You're a pretty good basketball player.
Sounds like
you're pretty good.
Like next year's team could be pretty dang good.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Yes. Well, and then next year they get that girl from Kovac, I think is her name. She's like, because the one thing missing from this team is a true post, like a Jessica Shepard, Brianna Turner can do damage down low. Like Maddie Westbeld, Sean Davis and I were talking about this. She's more of like a stretch four, but they need her to play bigger because they don't really have a lot of that. Kylie Watson's not really that kind of player. They don't have that true post presence. And hopefully the girl next year, because she's a top 10 player also. Like Hannah was a top five player. And
she's like 6 foot, right?
Yeah, she's like 6 foot.
Yeah.
Who? Kovac? She's like 6'4".
The girl coming in.
Yeah.
6'4". Wow.
Yeah, and she's like a true post player. Like you watch her highlights, she's scoring at the rim. She can drive to the rim. I mean, she can step out and pop one, but that's not what makes her a 5-star top 5 player. It's her ability to play in the post and dominate in the post. And when you watch South Carolina play and you watch Notre Dame, like early in the game, Notre Dame was hanging with them because the guards were able to go. But eventually the game slowed down. It became a half-court game, and the size just dominated Notre Dame, right? Yeah. And that's where they just don't have that presence right now. They don't have that down in the post presence that allows them to compete with those type of teams. And so, because like you need Maddie and Hannah to go off to beat UConn. If Maddie's not going off, then you're in trouble because that's the only real scoring presence you have down low. Nat Marshall's turned into a nice role player. She has. But if you had like a true post player and then Nat was kind of coming in as part of rotation, she'd be more effective as well. So that's going to be really the thing that they need is they've got to do a better job. She recruits guards as well as any team in the country. Coach Ivy does, as well as any team in the country. She's got to do a better job of not relying on the portal every year to get the post where it needs to be. And that's why getting Kate Kovac next year is so huge. But she's got to keep that rolling, because remember that team that they had that won the title, right? I mean, they had legit guards and Arike Ogunbowale. Jackie Young was the number 1 overall pick. You had Marina. What was the other Mabry? Was it Marina? Was that the other? All the Mabry names that get confused. But you also had 2 legit first-round talent posts in Brianna Turner and Jessica Shepard. That's what made that team so good, is you could beat them inside or out. This team is an outside-driven team. I mean, the biggest shot that Maddie Westbeld, the 2 biggest shots Maddie Westbeld hit in the game on the other day were triples, were 3-pointers, right? And so they need a little bit more of that presence down low, in my opinion. So we talk women's basketball. It's just a fun conversation. Lots of good stuff. You guys are killing it today in the questions, man. I'm really enjoying the questions y'all are bringing to the table.
We had Nicholas Grosh. To everyone, if Freeman mirrors Jim Harbaugh's 8-year record at Michigan, meaning Notre Dame wins the national.
Was there supposed to be another part to that question? Let me go see if I can find it.
Certainly feels like it's a cliffhanger there, but
it's like wants to keep us guessing. Let's see if there was another part of that. I don't see another part of that from Nicholas. Is it more of like would we be happy?
Yes, I would be happy. If there's a national championship at the end of the road, I would be happy. Yes.
Sure. If it takes him 8 years, that's better than him taking no years. I mean, that's kind of the way that I would look at it, Nicholas. I hope that it doesn't take 8 years. I'd like to see one get there sooner. But sure.
Beggars can't be chooser, baby.
Yeah. I'll take it.
Yeah.
Here's one, Ryan. It's a good one.
Irish 215, Chicago style or New York style pizza. So I've been introduced to Chicago over the last few years style pizza. I actually had never really had it until
the deep dish type or the other type?
Yeah, deep dish. So I haven't really done the deep dish thing until probably like 4 or 5 years ago, somewhere in that ballpark. I'm a New York style guy. I like thinner crusts personally. I like the little crunch. I'm a big texture guy, so I'm down with the crunch.
Now, if you ask Sean Davis, he'll tell you that deep dish stuff is not real Chicago style pizza. That's more marketing. Say that. But the type that's more what he calls Chicago style pizza is more of the flat that you cut into smaller pieces, which is kind of what I grew up on in Ohio. Is more of the Midwestern style, which is good because if you cook it that way, Ryan, it also has a much more firmer crust, like almost like a bit of a crisp crust to it. But even then, I'm still a New York style guy, but it's really, really close between the two. If we're talking what Sean says is New York style, Chicago style, if we're talking the deep dish, I think that stuff is hot garbage, especially the ones that put the sauce on the top. Can't fool with that, man. No, thank you.
I don't hate it. I mean, as long as it's done well, I think there's good flavor there. But yeah, I'm a big texture guy, so I like a little crunch with everything I'm eating mostly. So
agree.
We had NH. Who was your favorite player to watch in the games this weekend? Who was your favorite Notre Dame player this weekend as well for the Notre Dame player? Or are we talking just
this weekend? I mean, I'm a quarterback guy, so it's the quarterbacks. It's Pat Mahomes. You know, I do love watching Christian McCaffrey play. He's really good.
Great. He's great.
But I mean, Notre Dame. I mean, Drew Tranquill and I thought Aaron Banks had some huge blocks in that game. I mean, he had a really nice game for the Niners. For Notre Dame, I thought that Drew Tranquill had a great game for the. I mean, what was that 3rd-and-1 play where he just stepped in the hole and just drilled the running back? Was it the running back or was it Lamar? It was a running back. It wasn't Lamar, was it? Or was it Lamar?
I think it was Gus Edwards, right?
That's what I thought too.
Or Justice Edwards is one of those two.
He's not. If it was that, he's not small. I mean, I thought he played a great game. If he was that one sack away where he had Lamar in the backfield and he couldn't bring him down. If he gets that sack, that I think even more so. Kyle Hamilton was phenomenal. And even the touchdown he gave up was like, that was a great ball by Pat Mahomes. Yeah, I mean, there's nothing. Awesome, I thought Kyle played. I thought Kyle was a little too high on that one, but it's just like, I mean, that was a phenomenal ball and catch by two of the best to ever, two of the best in this generation at their positions. But after that, Kyle was a force. I mean, he was exceptional in that game. So I don't know if I have a favorite. I thought they all played great. I enjoyed watching all those Notre Dame guys.
Kyle's a stud, man. He's such a good player already. It's insane. I mean, he's literally probably the best safety in the NFL as a sophomore, like as a second-year player. He's been fantastic. One guy I love playing, even though he's kind of a weirdo, is Nick Bosa is really good, man. Like Nick Bosa is an absolute animal for the 49ers. I don't know if people heard it, but like after not this past game, the game before, a reporter asked him, he just got such a dry personality. It's hilarious, but it's like, he's like, "Oh, you're gonna drink some beer to celebrate?" And this is literally his response, Nick Bosa. "You're gonna drink some beer to celebrate?" "No beer for me. Maybe something else." Walks off. Like, what?
After last week's game? Yeah.
Yes, he is the weirdest guy ever, man. But that kid.
Both of those brothers have like no personalities. What's very weird? Actually, they have personality. They're very weird. They're both kind of like meatwads.
Joey's like a big meathead and like super loud, like Joey. Yeah. Nick's more like soft spoken, but like weird. Like he's so weird.
Odd cats,
I would hang out with Nick Bosa though. He's
there was the sack he had. I think it was the third quarter, Ryan.
Yeah,
and he buckled that tackle, and I thought watching this, like, why would they put a tight end in that situation on Nick Bosa?
No, it was
because he destroyed the guy. You know what I'm saying? Like he destroyed the guy like buckled him back. I'm like, why would they do that? And then like, holy crap, that showed the replay. I was like, that was the right tackle. Like, oh my god.
They brought the extra tackle in, Dan Skipper. They do it a lot. And he's like legitimately 6'9", 320 pounds.
And
like
he buckled him. It was crazy. Oh yeah, he's a pretty good player. He's a pretty good.
He's a really good player, man. He's a really good player.
Yeah, no doubt about it.
He doesn't like beer apparently, so there you go.
It's not hard enough for him. If you know anything about the Bosas, that's not nearly hard enough for them.
Maybe something else. Irish blooded. Which realigned conference do you think will be most interesting? Watch roll out next season.
Well, yeah. Go ahead, Ryan. If you have an opinion, you can go start it off.
My immediacy was just the Big Ten because the teams that they're bringing in are so different than the teams that are in there already. Like, I guess you could say the same ish in the SEC as far as bringing in the Texas and Oklahoma, kind of, but like Oregon, USC, and those types of schools run their team offensively just so much different than most Big Ten teams, like 98% of the Big Ten teams. So I would say Big Ten just because it's such a clash of styles that's going to be interesting to watch how it kind of fuses together.
Well, and the other part of it too, Ryan, it's kind of along those lines is Texas and Oklahoma make the SEC stronger by adding 2 more good teams to an already deep league. To me, the Big Ten completely changes with the addition of these 4 teams because it was such a bad league the last few years, in my opinion. Like, very top heavy, very good teams at the top, but you kind of felt like every year you could say a team from the Big Ten is going to make the playoff this year, and the 4-team playoff, because it's like one of those 2 teams is going to go 11-1, and they're going to both beat up everybody else. It's just whoever wins Ohio State, Michigan's going to go to the playoff because the league sucks. They're not going to get beat. Ohio State has good non-conference schedules, but Michigan didn't. One of them's going to go. Now it's like if you earn it out of the Big Ten, let's just say we were still doing the 14 playoff, you'd have to earn it in the Big Ten now. You know what I mean? Because of Oregon and even Washington won't be as good next year, but they're not going to come in and be like 4-8. I don't think. You know, they're still a good football team. UCLA is going to still a good football team, and USC is going to be talented. So I think the intrigue is going to be that. And then also, I think you talk about this too, Ryan. Oklahoma and Texas don't do anything that doesn't exist in the SEC. Maybe they do it better, but like we literally watched the Texas offense win a title in the SEC when Sark was running the Alabama offense in 2020. Right? I mean, it's not really new.
Foreign,
What you said this, Ryan, and I think it's the best part about why the Big Ten is why I'm with you. It's because you're seeing such a contrasting styles coming into the league. Yeah. Right? I mean, it's just completely different brand of football coming into the league. A little bit less that Kalen DeBoer's not at Washington. It would have made it even more intriguing, but you're still going to see USC is going to do things that are a lot different than what other teams do. Oregon is going to work at a pace that's so much different than what everybody else does. And you're also seeing a huge infusion of athleticism from these 4 teams. That's lacking at most teams outside of Penn State, Ohio State, and Michigan. And so to me, it just makes the quality of the league is much better now because of what's being added. In my opinion,
Jed Fish is a big spread guy as well, so you're still going to see that kind of spread it out, manipulate space type of stuff from Washington next year as well.
Yeah, and I saw that your boy Will Rogers is going to stay and go and play at Washington.
There you go, baby. Yeah. There you go.
Withdrew from the portal, so no, I think the Big Ten's going to be much more intriguing.
Washington was trying to get Noah Fafita to come over from Arizona, but he said nope, and they're like, okay, well, you can stay. Fine, you can stay.
Well, and they did sign that freshman. Right, he did follow him there, right? The kid that played in the All-American game.
He's talented, man, but that kid's like 5'9". He's a small cat, but he can play, man. He's pretty good, so I think he'll be all right. But very small kid though. Pretty sure he was listed at 5'9" as well, so that's usually not a great sign. But
here's another one too: is I would actually put the Big 12 ahead of the SEC from a most interested to watch standpoint because that league is going to look so different than what it has in the past. And I'm curious to see like who kind of early on emerges as the teams to beat in that league. Right. That's going to be interesting. Without Texas, without Oklahoma, you're adding Utah, you're adding Colorado, you're adding the Arizona schools, BYU and Cincinnati kind of going to year 2. Can TCU bounce back? There's going to be a ton of interesting story. It's not going to be as good a football as the SEC and Big Ten. I'm not saying that, but from a storyline to make it intriguing to watch it roll out. I mean, you're battling for supremacy. Oklahoma has largely dominated that conference for the last 10 plus years, right? Texas has had some years here and there. TCU has popped up with a year here and a year there, and Baylor's had a couple years here and there. But I mean, consistently, it's been Oklahoma has been the team to beat. Well, they're gone now. Texas has kind of emerged this season, and it's had Ehlinger had that one year they went to the Sugar Bowl, and but it's been an Oklahoma-dominated league, and Texas was always the storyline because is this the year Texas is back? Well, that's gone now. So now it's like, okay, who's going to seize hold of that? We're the best teams in this conference. Does TCU take advantage? Is it Kansas State? Is Lance Leopold and what he's doing at Kansas? How are the new Arizona teams going to be? I really thought Arizona had a shot. If Jed Fish would have stayed at Arizona, I thought they would have had a shot to kind of come in and become one of the top teams in that league. Oklahoma State, I mean, one of the most underrated coaching jobs in college football this year, in my opinion, was the job Mike Gundy did at Oklahoma State. They got raided by the portal last year, like raided by the portal. And then they started the year off really bad, had that blowout butt kicking at the hands of South Alabama. They lost at home 30-7 to South Alabama. And to bounce back the way they did and play for the Big 12 title was impressive. Like, that was a really good coaching job by Mike Gundy. Like, one of the best he's ever done, in my opinion. And he did it with Alan Bowman at quarterback.
Who's coming back, baby? Who's coming back?
Year. That made it even more impressive, right?
Yep.
And like, I'd never heard of that running back that they had before this year. I didn't know who that kid was. I'd never heard of him before until this year.
That's pretty good.
I know he played last year, but like, you know, and then that was a heck of a coaching job by Mike Gundy. So there's just a lot of that type of stuff in the Big 12 that I'm very curious to see.
Yep. I'm curious to see what Colorado does now that Deion Sanders took the Dallas Cowboys head coaching job. Oh, that didn't happen? I got it.
All right, Robert Griffin III.
They didn't have any interest there, huh? Wow. Who would have thought?
Yep.
God.
All right. Let's go back to John A1.
John A1. Notre Dame 2015 unit had an explosive rushing attack with CJ Prosise. Was that team efficient in short yardage situations without a power runner? That's a great question. I don't know. I can't remember.
Well, it wasn't so much that they lost what hurt them, Ryan, is Torian Folston was a really good short yardage back because he was quick and he had good vision and he was low. He could just get low and kind of burrow. And then they lost Malik. I mean, who was their short yardage? What was that made their short yardage game so dynamic in the bowl game against LSU the year before? It was that read zone, power read, those different things that they did with Torian and Malik in the backfield. And you lost both of them by the end of the second game. I think that hurt their power running game big time. And they just didn't rotate. They hardly played Josh Adams at all, and he's not a power back either.
I'm trying to remember. I mean, was Deshaun kind of used as a short yardage guy? I mean,
at times, they'd run like some power stuff and things like that, but they weren't great at it. You know, they were a really heavy 11 personnel team because the other thing too is they couldn't do 12 personnel very effectively most of the year because when you lost Durham Smythe, you didn't have a very deep tight end room to begin with. When Durham got hurt, he got replaced by Alize Mack, who was a true freshman, and then your other tight end was like Nick Wisher, who wasn't a big blocking kind of guy. He was a pass catcher kind of guy too. So that hurt some of their options as well from that football team. And it made it tough to really be that kind of power running team, in my opinion.
Right. Sure.
All right, let's sit. I want to respond to like Andrew Gilmore said. I think the Big 12 is going to have a major reality check. No Texas or Oklahoma makes a huge dent in ratings. You so much of what you talk about is based on perception, Andrew, and that's the problem that we have. It's like, you know what else is in the Big 12 right now, right? A lot of really good freaking football coaches are in the Big 12 right now. But it's like the Big 12 is not okay. They're going to have a reality check from a rating standpoint, but maybe they're still in some pretty football driven areas, but I'm just talking about the football. Like, can we just talk about like the football? There's good football coaches. I want to see the football. I don't care about ratings. And we allow so much of this crap to fuel our conversations, man. Like, what about the football part of it? You know what I mean? Like, that's what I want to see. No, the ratings aren't going to be great, which is why the Big 12 lost Texas and Oklahoma. Guess what? The ratings weren't great when Texas and Oklahoma were in the league either, which is why they left, which is why they don't have a big league. You know, so I don't care, man. I don't care about that stuff. The football is going to be fun to watch, in my opinion, because there's some really good football coaches in that league, Ryan. I mean, Kyle Whittingham is being added to that league. Yes. You know, Kenny Dillingham is a pretty good offensive mind who's being added to that league. You have Jed.
Oh, sorry, Jed Fish is Big Ten. My bad.
You have the guy TCU.
I keep forgetting he's at Washington.
Sonny Dykes. You have Mike Gundy and the job he's done. I mean, there's some good football coaches in that league. Oh, Lance Leopold, Chris Kleiman at the two Tech Kansas schools.
Like, SMU's in the Big 12 now too, right? So the Rhett Lashley?
No. SMU's moving to the ACC.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
Yeah. UCF.
They might do some damage in the ACC, man. They might do some damage in the ACC. I like SMU. I like SMU a lot.
They've got some ability, and I mean, Preston Stone's back. He's young, right? He's got another year or two left, right?
He got hurt at the end of the season. I don't know how long he's going to be out for, but he's good player.
And every year, like they're producing some receiver to the NFL draft that's a sleeper that everybody falls in love with. It's like every year there's some SMU receiver that people fall in love with. It wasn't the kid that Kansas City had. He was from SMU.
Rishi Rice. Yeah. And then there's Malachi Corley this year, who's another guy who's going to be the Senior Bowl.
There you go. Yep. There you go. that's not going to stop because they're in the ACC. If anything, it might get them a couple kids that they maybe have lost because they're in the ACC. So yeah, we'll see.
Yep. Joe Marciano says, I heard Lauren Landau will have his first press conference Friday. What are you looking forward to hearing from him?
I don't care. I'm not looking forward to hearing anything from him. I just want to hear him talk. That's not to say whatever. I mean, I'm looking forward to hearing about his personality. I don't really care what he says. I don't ever care what coaches say in press conferences. It's about what do you do. And maybe that's because I dealt with covering Brian Kelly for a decade that I just kind of dismiss like 90% of the crap that's said at a press conference is he's just giving us something to talk about, and it's not actually anything to it. And that's being generous with 90%. So I don't really care what he says. I want to see the product on the field. I don't care to ever, you know what I mean? Like in the kind of questions he's going to get asked, and that, like, what I would love is to have Lauren Landau on our show where we could really talk football with him and talk like pick his brain. But like these type of things are just going to be like these really just like, I won't say anything else because I don't sound like I'm talking bad about the media, but the type of questions that get asked tend to be stuff that it just doesn't really, it's a cool story, but it doesn't really tell us a whole lot about who he is or what's he going to be.
The only answer I'm interested in mostly is just, I hope someone asks, and I'm assuming that this is a pretty natural question to ask this, but there's different philosophies around strength and conditioning, right? Mm-hmm. What is your philosophy about it? Like, what do you believe in? I just want to hear that part of it. That's all. I just want to hear about his philosophy as far as how he approached making athletes better and recovery. That's all I really want to hear. And I hope that we get that answer, because I'm assuming that someone's going to ask that question, because I feel like that's a pretty natural question to ask a new coach, but could be wrong, I guess.
So it looks like Nicholas followed up with a question that better got to his question.
He says, to everyone, could you handle 6 more year wait before we win a national championship in Freeman's 8th year, similar to Jim Harbaugh's record? Yes, I could. Back to the original point. Like, if I don't care if it's year 8 or if it's year 4. I mean, it'd be nicer if it was year 4, but like, honestly, I just need a championship at some point, man. Like, that's, and I think the one thing about, like, so Michigan as it currently stands is, Jim Harbaugh vaulted for the NFL. I like, in this hypothetical, I don't know what the next step is for Marcus Freeman, if he would leave after he finally wins one, or what the perspective would be. But you also, I mean, the one thing about Harbaugh is that he built a program that I think with Sherrone Moore taking over could be sustained. Like, I don't think it's a 1 year and then you suck for the rest of your time there, right? Like, I do think there's some sustainability there. So if Marcus Freeman creates a sustainable program that wins in year 8, I'll be happy. Yes, I will be happy at that point.
The process to get there won't. I don't think either of us are saying we're going to enjoy 6 years of what more years of, or 5 more years of what Michigan went through. Like, I won't enjoy the 2020 version of what Michigan went through. But so I don't know that I would necessarily enjoy the process being exactly the same.
Well, hopefully we never have to go through another COVID year, but yes, agreed. Agreed.
But if I have to wait till the 8th year to actually see them win a title, then it's well worth the wait. To your point, Ryan, absolutely, no question.
Yep.
All right.
We had Adam Minami with another one. How many times did you hear Kyle Hamilton's name last night? He was unreal. First team All-Pro, well-deserved, proud to rep him. Yeah, man, it was all night. I mean, he's that type of player. Brian, I mean, but like, that was the best part of his game, even when he was at Notre Dame, right? It was that he could affect the game in so many different ways. Like, you just don't see 6'4", 215+ guys that can play from the roof, that can come down, could be involved in the run game, could blitz when you want him to blitz, can play some man-to-man and get slots at times. Like, that's what made him a pretty rare player, in my opinion, was just the versatility he brought with the size and the athletic component that he had. So,
Well, I mean, you'd see him you'd see him coming from depth. You'd see him kind of playing in the middle. You'd see him lining up in the slot. You'd see, I mean, he just, like, there's times he's lining up off the edge. I mean, you just never knew where he's going to come from. I think the Ravens, I don't know if they've done this all year. I assume they have, but I loved how the Ravens used him this season. Like I said, I don't watch regular season NFL, but watching these last couple weeks, I mean, the way that they use him to just play all over the field, and just, he's a weapon against the pass. I mean, there were times where it's like, okay, they're putting Kyle Hamilton on Travis Kelce in this particular situation. And I thought maybe they should have leaned into that a little bit more, because a lot of the big plays, again, you had the one touchdown, but a lot of the big plays Travis Kelce made were against zone. Yeah. And like, I don't know that's like, to me, maybe back in the day that would have made a lot more sense. But now with Travis Kelce's not quite the athlete that he was 5 years ago, sure. But he's still really smart up here. And I kind of felt like I'd have made him have to separate consistently against my safeties and Kyle Hamilton. You know what I mean? Like, that's just a small little nitpick there. But Mike Macdonald and John Harbaugh, smarter football coaches than I am. But that would have been my only thing. But then again, if you're using that, then they could kind of use Kelce as a decoy to get Kyle Hamilton away from impacting the football. And that's the other thing is, what do you want more, to him do that or to have him impacting the football? And at the end of the day, they held the Chiefs to 17 points. Defense did their part. I mean, defense did their part to win that football game, in my opinion.
Mike Macdonald's a stud as a defensive coordinator. He's a really good defensive coordinator. And yeah, I mean, they were using him like that all year. I mean, I think his stat line was like 80 total tackles, 10 tackles for loss, 3 sacks, 4 interceptions, 13 pass breakups. Like, he was that guy all year. Swiss Army knife on the back end, truly.
All right, we got some more. Here's an interesting one.
Irish 215 asks, best tailgate food and why? Well, I'm quite partial to wings. I'm a big wing guy, whether I'm at a tailgate, whether I'm at home watching the game, because I feel like wings can be so versatile, man. Like, there's so many different rubs, there's so many different sauces that you can use with a wing. Just can't go wrong with wings. Just can't go wrong with them.
I don't particularly I love wings if I'm having a party at home. Wings are great. Yeah. I don't like wings so much at a tailgate because they can be messy. And unless you have for me, that matters to me because I have to go into the stadium and work afterwards. You know what I mean? So it's like,
pop them in, bone in, baby. And you can just make that happen. All right.
It depends. I mean, I've had so many different types of tailgate food. I mean, burgers are always a go-to if they can be made well.
I like pulled chicken too. Some pulled chicken sliders, like that type
of
thing.
That's why you got to come to one of the tailgates my mom does, Ryan. She does that. Yep. She'll make barbecue chicken, like pulled chicken. She'll make that for it. She also makes like barbecue hot dogs. Like, she'll dice them up, make barbecue hot dogs. Those are good to have. But you know what? I've never been like a big like steak, like things like that. I want something that, like, to me, the best things to eat at tailgate are things that I can just eat with my hand. And once you make me have to get out utensils and stuff, it's kind of like, like, this is.
Oh, it's good. I did have a good steak sandwich from the Knights of Columbus this past year, though, which was
that's
really
different,
good, so.
Right?
It's portable,
but that's right. Exactly.
Yep.
Stuff like that. I mean, a good sandwich. There can be good, like I'm a big sandwich guy. Whatever type of thing it is at a tailgate, that's good to have.
Yep. Agreed.
So. Yep. Good stuff. At home, Ryan, wings are good. Wings and nachos are my Angela makes this really good bean dip for that I couldn't have it this weekend because she wasn't here, but is there 2 weeks before the Super Bowl or is it just one?
2 weeks. It's 2 weeks.
Okay, perfect. Yep. So she'll be back home before hold on. What day is the Super Bowl? You know what? No, we won't.
Not this Sunday, next Sunday. Yep.
Oh no, wait. So we will still have an oven. Because I'm sitting there thinking, like, I won't have an oven because they're starting their demolition starts next Monday, but we have a double oven in the wall that they're not taking out, so that'll be good. We just won't have a stove or a microwave or anything else for 6 weeks, which is going to suck, but it is what it is. All right.
We had Ida Benami with another one. We've heard Derek Meadows doesn't have the best hands. It's one video, but I'm sure some of you guys saw the catch this past weekend. Tom Lloyd crystal balled him as well.
Well, I mean, Notre Dame's been in a good place for a while with him.
And I literally said like 2 weeks ago that Notre Dame, Washington have been bouting it out, and now that Washington has a coaching change, that probably plays in Notre Dame's favor.
But you didn't do the crystal ball, Ryan, so there wasn't that clickbait thing you could do to do it, and that's not a shot at Tom. That's a shot at 24/7. Tom's doing what he's supposed to. He's literally required to do that kind of stuff. Yeah. So that's not anything about Tom. But no, I've been saying this for a while, Ryan. And look, I mean, it's a great play. Terrible press release. Terrible vertical release. It was a bad route overall. He finished it with a phenomenal catch, and I thought he was in bounds. I mean, other people say he was out of bounds. I thought he was out of bounds. Yeah.
I slowed down the video, and he had a foot in. He was
I thought so too.
Yeah.
But that's why. But that's all Bishop. Here's a problem. He had 8 touchdowns this year at Bishop Gorman. Only caught 15 passes. He was the team's number 4 leading receiver. Like, there's a reason for that, right? He's got a very raw game, but I can teach him how to run routes, right? That's the thing is, if I'm a receivers coach, I can teach him how to do better at the getting off the line. I can teach him to be a better route runner. I can teach him how to better use his body. My strength coach can make him stronger so he can be more effective. I can't teach 6'6". I can't teach 4'5". The only thing that concerns me, and this is what I've said, is, look, I've never said don't take him. I've never said he's not a good player or, a good prospect. I've said, look, you have to understand what you're getting with Derek Meadows. That's the thing. Notre Dame fans, you have to understand what you're getting. You can't always fix hands. Sometimes you can. Sometimes it's an experience thing. It's a concentration thing. It's my fingers are too tight. My fingers are too loose. My elbows are too tight. My elbows are too loose. There's all types of things that can say, hey, that's why this guy doesn't catch the ball consistently, and I can improve it. But sometimes you can't, Ryan. Some guys just don't have the hand-eye coordination or whatever the case may be. You have to understand that that's a concern about him. The overall rawness of his game thing is like that impacts where he should be ranked. But that part doesn't impact whether you take him or not, because if you're a receivers coach worth a darn, you should be drooling over a kid like Derek Meadows, right?
Yeah.
And so it just, my excitement about getting Derek Meadows, if that happens, and again, I think he's still a little bit of a ways off from making a decision. It's the tools are exciting.
He wants to take officials. I literally talked to him last week. I think I did an update. Like he wants to take officials before making a final decision. So
what happened this weekend is going to make it tougher for Notre Dame, because there's going to be more schools that are going to get on him and things like that. And, it is what it is. But you have to have the right kind of class around him too, Ryan. You're going to need some sure thing type of players in the class around him. That's going to be a part of it too, because there is some boom or bust to him. But the reason you take him is because the boom could be really, really impressive. And
you feel better about taking him, especially with Mike Brown as the wide receiver coach from a technical perspective, and getting him to, be that type of guy. I mean, at the end of the day, man, how excited look, 6'5", 6'6", can run and can leap for days. So I'll be excited if they can get Derek Meadows. It's a boomer bust to a degree, but it's coaching's betting on themselves though. And if Mike Brown is as good a developer as we think he can be, you're going to get the best or near best of Derek Meadows if he's willing to put in the work. So we'll see.
Yep.
Shall see.
It certainly enhances your chances that you get that. Yeah. That's the thing, right, Ryan, is when you have better coaching, Harry Hiestand didn't turn every raw kid into a star, but you felt like the chances of it happening were pretty good when you had a guy like that coaching. And I feel better to your point.
He's willing to put the work in.
Exactly.
Yep.
Exactly.
And I everything I can gather from Derek is that he is a very worker.
Well, and he's also the other thing too is Ryan is right now he's running track. He does all these other things. Yeah. He's not someone who's focusing on the craft of playing wide receiver year round. When that time comes, there's also an expectation that his game will get better at that point. Because I think he's doing hurdles and all those other type of stuff right now.
300 hurdles, I think is what he's doing right now. So we got Salty. Salty, what's up? Who will have more success? Define that as you will and explain your choice over the next 5 years. Jim Harbaugh at the Los Angeles Chargers or Kalen DeBoer at Alabama?
Let's define success first, Ryan. I mean, consistency
I would
plus
say,
playing for championships. Would you say that's?
Yeah, I would also. I think there also has to be a little bit of a disclaimer as far as making a program better than where you got it as well.
Sure.
There has to be some element of that.
Well, in that case, then it's a no-brainer. It's going to be Jim Harbaugh because Kalen DeBoer is walking into a situation where they're in the playoff every year. I mean, it's like there's no way Kalen DeBoer. It's not possible for Kalen DeBoer to make the program better. He'd literally have to win it every year for him to do better.
Sustaining success could be also boiled in there. Yeah.
The thing about Harbaugh too is if you're going to take out the context of what he's replacing out of the conversation, I think it will lean towards Kalen DeBoer, because I do think Kalen DeBoer is going to keep Alabama being pretty good. I don't is Jim Harbaugh I'm asking this, Ryan. This isn't a hypothetical because I don't follow the team. I know he's got a quarterback that's got talent, but do the Chargers have the kind of roster where he can make an immediate impact, where they can kind of go challenge for a playoff year next year? Or is it going to take him a couple years to build it up?
I think that they could flip things around pretty quickly in LA, because I think the Chargers have been a lot better than what they're. I mean, I know they made the playoffs 2 years ago, but like they were a much better team than what they were this year. They were just very poorly coached. I mean,
so the roster is in a position where it can be a quick fix, in your opinion.
In certain avenues. I would say this: like they have a franchise quarterback who's coming off an injury, but he's still a franchise quarterback. They have some pieces on the offensive line, like Rashawn Slater. They have a couple pass catchers. They need to figure out the defense, because the defense has pieces, but it just hasn't been good over the last couple years. So like defensively, they need to figure things out, especially in the secondary. But I think if they hit on certain moves this offseason, they could be a playoff team in 2024 and a whole lot better.
Do they have a first round pick?
Believe so. Yeah, I don't think they do. Yeah, they do. I think it's like right? I think it's like number 5 overall, I believe now, with how it finished. So yeah.
Whew, goodness gracious.
Yep. Brandon Plensner, what's up with the possible 2024 Illinois offensive lineman that visited Notre Dame this past weekend? Is Notre Dame looking to take another 2024 offensive lineman possibly?
Yeah, that is not a scholarship situation. That is a walk-on situation through and through. It's the kid that visited who's also part of the track. I think that's who he's talking about. Brandon, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's the kid that also is part of the track program. He's a thrower. So he did a dual visit with football and then also with track. I believe that's who Brandon's talking about. That is not a scholarship. Yeah, that is not a scholarship situation. So I don't believe that is. So it wouldn't really impact. Would Notre Dame take another 2024 offensive lineman if it's a walk-on? Absolutely. Of course. I don't think it has anything to do with. I don't think it's a scholarship situation, though, in my opinion. Unless I'm missing something, Brandon. But then you can let me know if I'm talking about somebody. If you're talking about somebody different in that situation. All right. There we go, Ryan.
Frank G, if you guys had a pick of one recruit all time that Notre Dame missed out on that you wished you could have seen play for Notre Dame, who would it be? As always, keep up the great work. 2 guys, Brian. 2 for me quickly. Randy Moss, who Notre Dame obviously had a very good chance with. The other one's Luke Kuechly that they did not push for, obviously. Yep, those are my 2.
mean, you could throw in, this is a little bit when you were younger, Ryan. Javon Kearse wanted to come to Notre Dame, but Notre Dame used up his scholarship. I mean, that would have been pretty darn good. But I think Olsen? Luke Kuechly, I mean, he was at Notre Dame.
I know.
Yeah. But it's hard to not go with Luke Kuechly on defense, Ryan, because of the context of when he would have played. He would have been side by side for Manti Te'o for 3 seasons. And
he's a future NFL Hall of Famer, despite only playing like 7 years in the NFL. So,
Exactly. So I mean, that would have been a holy moly, that'd have been fun to watch. But offensively, that's not even the only other person that you could maybe factor in. But I don't ever think he was ever really going to pick Notre Dame just because of basketball. Is Allen Iverson. There was a lot of talk that Allen Iverson wanted to come to Notre Dame too. Could you imagine Allen Iverson running Lou Holtz's offense, throwing to Randy Moss?
I always love the people that act like Allen Iverson was like, some people kind of make comments that he was like a dumb person or something like that. I'm like, the guy went to Georgetown, right? Like, you understand that? Or
look, Allen Iverson has made some poor decisions in his life, like a lot of people did, right? And there's certain parts of, I'm not know how to say this without getting into trouble, but the look can confuse people.
Yeah, sure.
Allen Iverson is not dumb. He's a smart guy.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I mean, it was the same thing this past cycle with the 2023 class with Rico Flores. Like there was some pushback because of like the girls and stuff. I'm just like, that doesn't mean that he's not a good fit. You know what I mean?
Right. So, Allen Iverson would have been a better academic fit for Notre Dame than Randy Moss was.
Yeah, I believe
so. Yeah.
I mean, one went to Georgetown, right? So, like, yeah, makes sense.
But Randy Moss, I mean, in Ron Paulus's career would be viewed so differently if he had a chance to throw to Randy Moss. I mean, differently. Yeah, that would have been because Randy Moss. I mean, that would have been. I'm trying to remember. So what was his last year? Was it 90? It was 97. Was his last year, right?
Sounds right.
And so he played in 95. He would have played in 95, 96, and 97. And so let me just look this up real quick, because I think he would have been with Paulus the first 2 years.
Okay.
But I don't remember if Paulus was – I forget when Paulus's career ended. Yeah, Paulus was there in 97 as well, because I couldn't remember if it was 97 or 98 when Jarius Jackson took over. But it would have been 97. And so your receiving core that year, Ryan, would have been Randy Moss in 1997. You'd had Ron Paulson quarterback. You'd had Autry Denson at running back, who rushed for almost 1,300 yards that year. Your receiving core would have been Randy Moss, Malcolm Johnson, Bobby Brown, Rakai Nelson. That would have been – because, like, all those guys get bumped down to number 2. Like, Bobby Brown and Malcolm Johnson were number 2s and 3s, right? They weren't supposed to be number 1s. By the way, I had a chance to meet Bobby Brown at a buddy of mine's tailgate this year, which is pretty cool. So, but that would have been a really nice receiving core, man.
For sure.
And they were Bobby Brown would have been your smallest guy at like 6'3", because Malcolm Johnson was like 6'4", 6'5" as well, of the starters. And then Rakai Nelson would have been a much better guy, sort of like that change of pace kind of slot guy. That'd have been fun to watch, man. Fun to watch. Oh, my goodness.
A quick side note. I'm sorry. I know this isn't related to what we're talking about, but someone had just texted me. Maris Loifau weighed in at the Senior Bowl today at 6'2", 239 pounds. Do you know how long his arms were?
33 and a half.
34-inch arms.
Holy moly.
That's insane,
long
dude.
For a linebacker. Goodness gracious.
Super. I now know why they played him on the edge at times. Like I now know.
That is nuts.
Yeah.
Goodness gracious. Any other measurements for any of the Notre Dame guys?
I was trying to look through, but I didn't want to look yet.
I understand. You didn't want to. Yeah, I get it. I get it. Well,
you're
allowed to in this instance, because you're getting it for me. Yeah.
Let me see.
I'll read this next one, Ryan. We heard so much about CJ Carr when he committed, but the same hype isn't there for Deuce Knight. Is Carr that much better, or is Deuce going to seriously push for Carr for the starting job? Ronnie, I kind of got to disagree with the entire premise. I mean, I kind of feel like once Deuce committed, people stopped talking about CJ Carr. Like, I mean, we hear very little about CJ Carr right now. So no, I don't know, Ronnie, who you're listening to or whatever, but like, I think Deuce is getting plenty of hype.
Yeah.
I mean, he's getting plenty of hype. So I guess I can't really answer your question, because I don't agree with the premise of it. I don't think the same hype isn't there for Deuce. I would strongly disagree with. Like some of the other day, matter of fact, I had to push back on some of the other day to defend CJ, because somebody was like, Deuce is a way better recruiter than CJ. I said, not really. He's a more vocal recruiter than CJ. But as you know, Ryan, CJ was very involved in recruiting that class. He just did it more behind the scenes, just different personalities. Deuce is more of a social media kid than CJ is. Not better, not worse, just different. But both very effective at recruiting. And right now, Deuce's biggest impact has been with defensive players. CJ May, Ivan Taylor, guys like that. I mean, Ryan, you had an interview. Who was the guy the other day? You interviewed some defensive player who was talking about how Deuce is on him all the time. Like, Deuce isn't just out recruiting receivers and running backs, y'all. I mean, Deuce is out there.
I know Burgess was talking about him a lot. I don't know if it was Burgess, maybe.
No, it was somebody it's somebody that was I mean, maybe it was Dallas or one of the. I mean, but the point is, like, he's recruiting Dallas Golden, he's recruiting Mark Zachary. I mean, he's recruiting everybody. Damian Shanklin. I mean, and CJ was that way as well, but CJ's impact was more on the offensive side of the ball. But you could talk to Kingston and those other guys. CJ was very involved in those recruitments as well. CJ just was more of the personal relationship type of thing, which Deuce is also doing, but Deuce also tweets about it more than CJ did, which is fine. I have no problem with that. It's his personality. And so I think Deuce gets plenty of hype. His recruiting ranking is not what CJ's was from everybody. CJ was ranked higher by most people at the same age, but like I just saw that ESPN dropped him like 30 spots or something like that. And, into like 120 something, whatever. I don't really care about that anymore. It's all kind of ridiculous, but I know Notre Dame fans are super fired up about Deuce as well. Yeah. The other thing too is Deuce isn't as accomplished as a player right now as CJ is either.
Yeah. It's more about upside than,
right. Current. So, but I just think your entire premise is not there. And as far as Is Duke seriously going to push CJ for the starting job? I mean, right now, I'm not talking about either of them with the starting job right now. It's just develop them.
Yeah.
If Deuce pans out, Deuce can beat out anybody.
Yes.
But beating out CJ won't be easy. Just like, CJ beating out Kenny Minchie won't be easy. Yep. So, that's why you recruit the way that they're recruiting right now at quarterback, because you increase your chances that I don't know who's going to be the star, but one of those guys is going to be a star. That's how I feel about it, right?
Absolutely.
Maybe two, and then maybe two. I mean, CJ could be that star, and then Deuce comes in, learns behind CJ, and then he becomes that star. Hopefully, he'll look at it that way. So, I think that's right now what I would bank on more. One of Kenny or CJ becomes a star. Deuce comes in, learns for a year, and then steps into the lineup either in year 2 or year 3, and he becomes the next star. That's the ideal scenario there. But I know Irish Breakdown hasn't not hyped up Deuce. I mean, but
everybody's excited about Deuce.
We haven't even had the second signing day yet for the 24 class. It's a little bit early for that right now.
I know. Very crazy. So I got 2 more Notre Dame players, Brian. Nothing on JD Bertrand yet.
Okay.
Sam Hartman, 6'1" even, 209 pounds, 39 and 39.
That's freaking crazy.
30 and 7/8 inch arms. So fine.
Or did they have to get the hand on that one?
9 and 5/8. So
if I just would have shut up and let you keep talking, we would have already had that already, right?
9 and 5/8. So above average hand size. Above.
And who was the second one?
Yep. Cam Hart, 6'2" and 7/8, 204 pounds, 9 and 6/8 inch hands, 32 and 5/8 inch arms, and has a 77 and 6/8 inch wingspan.
That's really good for a corner, correct?
Oh yeah, long arms. Yes. Yeah. Anytime you're over 32 inch arms, it's good. Anytime you're over 75.
And did you have him just under 33? Was that what you had it as? 32? Was it 32 and 5/8?
32 and 5/8. So he's closer to 33 than
than 32. It's pretty good.
And 6'3", 6'3".
Yeah. I hope he has a great week. I really do.
I think he will. It's a little tough for corners in that environment, but I think he'll do all right. Irish Gordy Knott, how do you feel about Mike Denbrock's ability to develop tight ends? If he can pull everything out of Raritan, he could become a first rounder with his size and explosiveness.
Well, first of all, Ryan, your thoughts on that? I mean, I think he's got a chance to be that. I mean, he's a freaky athlete, but it's way too early. I mean, just from a tool standpoint, but it's a little too early as far as development to get to that point. But with your point, 6'6" plus, that kind of explosiveness, sure. He'll have the red flag of the 2 torn ACLs. That's going to be the key. He's going to have to stay healthy for the rest of his career. But, I mean, he's going to have a lot of talent to work with at that position. Can he develop? How do I feel about it? He's a good developer of tight ends. I mean, he's coached there was years at Stanford and Washington and Notre Dame. He was tight ends and tackles. And then obviously at Notre Dame, he was wide receivers. But he developed the wide receivers pretty well with the help of his GA at the time, Ryan Mahaffey. So I think the tight ends will be developed fine. He hasn't necessarily been a part of offenses that have used the tight end a ton consistently. But somebody said this to me the other day, like, he's never really thrown to the tight end much. And I said, well, he's never had the tight end rooms like he had now. Like, 2014, you had Ben Koyak and Durham Smythe was a true freshman and Nick Wisher. It wasn't a super talented room. And Ben Koyak still caught 30 passes that year. But you had a really good receiving core back then, right? I mean, you had Will Fuller had his breakout season. You had Corey Robinson. You had C.J. Procise, Chris Brown, Amir Carlisle, and Torrey Hunter Jr. were all receivers on that team that year. You had 4 receivers had over 500 yards receiving that year. Like, that was more about how good your receiving core was. And you had just a solid player in Ben Koyak. Then in 2015, Durham Smythe gets hurt in the second game of the year, and he's out till the bowl game. And your next guy is a true freshman. So, I mean, you're just not going to have that same level of production. And then 2016, obviously, the tight end production was really bad. But that whole team was really bad. But again, who was your receiving core that year? Equinemi St. Brown, Torrey Hunter, Kevin Stepherson, C.J. Sanders, Chris Fink, Miles Boykin, Chase Claypool. Like, it's just the receivers were just better. This room will be a little bit different. And if you want evidence, like, okay, well, that sounds great in theory. What's your evidence for it? It's okay, well, look at his last 2 years in Cincinnati. In Cincinnati in 2020, the team that they had that played Georgia in the Peach Bowl, right? Their leading receiver was Josh Wiley, who had 20. He was their leader in catches He was their number 2 in catches, 1 behind Michael Young. He led the team in receiving yards, and he led the team in receiving touchdowns. He had twice as many as anybody else on the team. Plus, that same year, in 10 games, he had 28 catches, 353 yards, and 6 touchdowns. That same year, Leonard Taylor had 16 catches for 191 yards and a touchdown. And Bruno LaBelle, their other tight end, had 10 catches for 58 yards. So that's over 50 catches that season from your tight ends. And then in 2021, Josh Wiley was similar numbers, 26 catches, 332 yards, and 6 touchdowns. But Leonard Taylor that season had 28 catches, 268 yards, and 4 touchdowns. So in 2021, the tight ends caught 10 touchdowns, and your top 2 tight ends had about 600 yards and over 50 catches. So when he's had the kind of talent at there that's needed, you've seen the production. And when you look at LSU this year, I mean, they threw to Mason Taylor a little bit. He had 36 catches for 348 yards and a touchdown. But the reality is, Ryan, you weren't going to if you had Mitchell Evans at tight end, he's not going to be targeted much more than what Mason Taylor was targeted, because you had Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas and those guys at wide receiver. So it just depends on what the makeup of the roster is. I don't expect the tight ends to be targeted the next couple of years as much as they have been in the past, because I think the receiver play is going to be better, and you've got running backs that need to be more involved in the pass game. So I could see the tight end production going down from a volume standpoint. What I would like to see, Ryan, is if the catches are going to go down, the more the catches go down, the more the yards per catch go up. Because I think if you're smart about it, you can create some bigger play opportunities in your pass game with your tight ends because of how other parts of your offense are being used. Is something I would like to see. And so I think he's a good developer of those players. So you had some more stuff.
Yeah. I saw someone had posted it, and I found it on Twitter just to verify the information. But Joe Marciano did post that JD Bertrand was 6'1", and I did verify this, 235 pounds, 9 3/8, I would think was what he meant to say. Hands, wing, 75 2/8, arms, 30 1/4.
Those are some short arms for a linebacker.
Yes, they are. Anytime you're sub 31, you are a short line. The wingspan is actually not terrible considering his arms are short, though. So I guess he has broad shoulders, which is good. So
there you go.
On the plus, I guess, a little bit.
Yeah. I think didn't Drew Tranquil have sub 31 arms, or was he just over?
He was right around 31, I think. I think he might have been sub, but yeah.
31 and a half is what it says here. 31 and a half. Okay. And he was and the point I was going to make is he was considered to have short arms for a linebacker, which he does. I mean, and that's been the one knock on Drew that I've had, is he'll miss more tackles than you'd like to see him miss because he's not real long. But also to your point, Ryan, that you said JD was at 75 3/8.
75 and 75 1/4.
75 1/4 was this wingspan. I'm trying to find what Drew's wingspan was with arms that were an inch longer. You see here his wingspan. Do they not have it here? Nope, they don't have it here.
NFLCombineResults.com is the best spot for that type of stuff, by the way. I don't know if
NFL Combine Results. No, I was looking at the NFLCombineResults.com. Let's go find Drew Tranquil here. And he would have been the 2019 Combine, correct?
That sounds correct. Sounds correct.
Okay, let me try this. Drew Tranquil, NFL Combine wingspan. But let's see here. His wingspan.
I got it right here. I got it right
74 and a half, right?
So it's actually JD's is longer by over an inch.
That's what I was going to say, because Drew's is 74 1/4, right? 1 in, right?
Yep. So an inch short,
longer, even though the arms are shorter, which is kind of interesting. Very interesting. But those are some short arms for a linebacker, man.
They are, man. They are. I think nobody beats your boy. What was the linebacker Notre Dame had that ran pretty well at the pro day a couple years ago? His name's escaping me for
Drew White.
He was Drew White. Drew White had sub 30. Yeah. It was like 29 something.
I remember that. I was like, holy crap. Short. People want to know why he missed tackles. That right there. Yep. He's 225 and had short arms. 235. I'm hoping that DJ runs well this week. That's something that's going to be interesting. And if you have not seen it, Ryan did put a Senior Bowl preview at irishbreakdown.com today. So he kind of talked about like what's at stake and then what he wants to see, or not necessarily like what do they have to prove? What can guys do this week to really jump their stock in the NFL draft? What are some things Cam Hart can do that if he does this, and this week, he can raise his draft stock. And he had some really good analysis there. You can find that at irishbreakdown.com. Very well done. Now, there's a chance, Ryan, if you're on the message board, you know that Ryan's going to add another person to that roster later in the day. Has that been announced yet?
I have not seen it on Twitter as of yet.
It's on the message board, folks. Another reason to be on the message board.
Yeah. We had a question from Lucky Ducks 512. What position group playing elite next year will have the biggest impact on the seasons outside of quarterback, offensive line, and defensive line? You're taking 3 position groups out of this conversation? Wow, man.
Man. Wide receiver. I get that. I get why he's doing it, though, right? Because that's what we're always going to go to: line play and quarterback play, right? But I think you're right, Ryan. That would have been mine. Receiver play has to step up. Yeah, defensively, it would be linebacker. Mm-hmm. You know, I think they need to play. If they play at a high level next year, along with the D line, how do you run on Notre Dame like that? Yeah. Look, here's the thing. I don't expect the secondary to take much of a drop off if they have any drop off. I mean, you and I have debated. There's a chance if Rod Hurd can make a smooth transition to safety, that the secondary might even be better against the pass next year than it was this year. Because we both expect Benjamin to keep getting better and better. And because Benjamin this year was better than he was as a freshman. It just maybe wasn't as much better as maybe we hoped. He was a very good player, but was he quite as dominant as I hoped he would be? Probably not, but he's still a very good corner. And still in the conversation as one of the better corners, one of the best cornerbacks coming back next year. But it's like the bar is so high. I fully expect him to get even better next year. The question is how much. And he was still pretty good. And if you don't think Benjamin Morrison was really good this year, go talk to Marvin Harrison Jr. about how good Benjamin Morrison Jr. was this year, or Benjamin Morrison was this year. But as much as I love Cam, I don't think there's going to be a huge drop off at that other position with Christian Gray going into year 2 and Jaden Mickey. And I think safety has a chance to be even better. And you and I would just say, hey, look, we may discuss and debate who was better coming into Notre Dame, Thomas Harper or Jordan Clark or whatever. But again, my point, Ryan, is it's like this to me, right? I mean, it's like, okay, they're both pretty solid players coming in. I don't see a drop off is the point, right? I mean, it's not going to be any kind of noticeable drop off from Thomas Harper to Jordan Clark. And you've got Micah Bell surging. I've heard some really good things about what he did late in the year, that maybe he could be that number 2 guy, to the point where I wouldn't be surprised if they move Clarence or Lewis around outside and at safety more this year as Micah emerges as kind of that future there behind Jordan Clark at Rover. So I think the secondary has a chance to be really, really good. So then it comes down to, okay, what's that missing link towards being a really, truly elite defense? To me, it's what's the linebacker play going to be like? I expect the linebackers to play, and I really want to get your opinion on this, Ryan. I expect the linebackers to make more highlight reel plays next year, more knockout hits, more picking stuff off, more big plays. The question about how good they're going to be, however, is going to be, can they be consistent with such a younger group? If they are, you can make a case that the linebackers are more impactful next season, even though I don't think they're going to be they don't have to be as I don't think they'll be as consistently good as this group was as far as assignment-wise, but I think they'll be more impactful if they can just show some semblance of consistency and assignment effectiveness, because the length, the talent, the playmaking, all that I expect to be better next year, just from a God-given ability standpoint. That consistency is going to be the key. And if that group plays well, this defense is going to be really, really, really freaking good next year, in my opinion.
Yeah. I mean, they're the position that outside of Jack Kaiser, you just don't really know what to make of it at this point, right? Like, you just don't have a clear answer. It's like you've seen Jalen Sneed in spurts. You saw Drake Bowen in a couple, routes during the end that was impressive. You've seen Jane Osbury sparingly, obviously, at this point. So there's a lot of talent there. It's just, how good is it going to be? Are they ready? Are they still a year away? I mean, what's the overall impact going to be? I think that's certainly in the conversation. Wide receiver, obviously, on the other side of the ball, for all the reasons we've talked about. You expect to have a dual threat, big time quarterback potentially. You expect offensive line to at least be good, if not take massive strides. You expect the running back room to be really good. You expect the tight end room to be deep and talented. And I expect the wide receivers to be better, but until you see it, it's a question mark. You just haven't seen it at Notre Dame. I've never seen Bo Collins at Notre Dame. Never seen Chris Mitchell at Notre Dame. Never seen Cam Williams. Never seen Micah Gilbert. Never seen Logan Saldate. Jaden Harrison. There's a lot of newcomers coming in that get you super excited about wide receiver can be. but I've never seen them in the blue and gold. So until that happens, and seeing Jordan Faison step up, seeing Jaden Greathouse take a step, Jaden Thomas, and hopefully Deion Colsey staying healthy, it is going to be a question mark until it's not a question mark anymore.
And also, too, Ryan, to your point, if the receivers play to the level we think they can, it's not just, okay, the receivers are good. Yep. It's how much it – I mean, how do you – if Chris – like, it's – to your point, I don't know what those guys are going to do at Notre Dame. Notre Dame has 250 receptions and over 3,000 yards and 30 touchdowns coming back at wide receiver from 2023 production. But over half of that was done somewhere else. You know what I mean? And so you don't know how it's going to translate. But if it translates well and the receivers are what we hope they can be, it's like, how do you defend all them and Mitchell Evans and the run game and Riley Leonard running the football and scrambling and, you know, the running backs out of the backfield? That's the thing that could potentially be so fun about the offense next year. There's a lot of show me. There's a lot that has to get proven. But you just look at it, Ryan, it's like the talent on this offense could just be nuts next year if certain things pan out. And I would argue that the O-line is obviously numero uno to making that happen, but that's taken out of the equation. Receivers are next. I'm confident that if Riley Leonard's healthy, he's going to be good at quarterback next year. I'm far more confident in his transition into this offense than I was Sam Hartman's. I just think he's a better player. I have zero doubt about how good about Notre Dame is going to be good at running back next year. Zero. As long as Mitchell Evans is healthy, I have no doubt they're going to be really good at tight end next year. O-line and receiver are still question marks. There's potential, but there's still a lot of, I got to see it. Whether it's see it from a youth standpoint or see it from in a Notre Dame uniform standpoint, like you pointed out with the receivers, right? Those are legitimate things to discuss. Sure. The excitement, however, is sky high for me with all of that. It really is. And if Mitchell Evans is healthy, they don't need those guys to be Will Fuller. They don't need that. It just be good. I mean, there's you can be great with just one or two great players, but you can also be really dangerous with like 6 or 7 just legitimate weapons. And I think Notre Dame's going to be more like that next year with a quarterback who could be the kind of make plays with your legs kind of guy we're talking about. Like there's going to be 5 or 6 plays next year where a Notre Dame receiver has a big play and he does nothing but just get open on a scramble drill and they come up and Riley dumps it off over his head. Right?
The Chris Tyree against NC State play.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Oh, and the Chris Tyree against Georgia Tech a couple years ago, a Tyler Buckner play. Remember that one? Where Tyler's running left, they come up and he just dumps it over him and Chris catches it and runs 55 yards for Exactly.
Irish Gordian Knot, I know it's tough due to lack of film, but how do you feel about comparing Cole Mullins to George Karlaftis?
Coming out of high school, there's some body type similarities. I think George is a little thicker and a little bit more natural playing that position, where Cole as an edge player is just getting by on his athleticism. And so it's not lack of film that makes it tough. It's lack of seeing him play that position. Like, I don't think George Karlaftis could have played middle linebacker the way that Cole Mullins played middle linebacker, but he's not being recruited to play middle linebacker. Can he play defensive end as well as George Karlaftis did? That's a bigger question. But as far as like just certain body types and, you know, I think body type wise, IGK is the closest you're going to get to a comp for them. I think they're a little different athletes. And just how they play that position is way different. And now maybe this would have been a much better comp coming out of high school if we could have seen Cole Mullins play this year, but we didn't. What's funny is, Ryan, I saw George Karlaftis at Notre Dame's camp, and I remember the Notre Dame coaches just did not like – he had very tight hips, like very tight hips. I don't know if he had a bad day, if he didn't – I don't know what it was, but they were not high on him coming out of that camp. And then he went out as a senior in high school and dominated. Yeah. And they just never backed off of their he can't play here mantra. But George, I mean, now I think he'd have picked Notre Dame. I mean, I know his dad played at Purdue and his father passed away, and there was that pull there. But I think if Notre Dame would have made a push for him that summer, I think he'd have picked Notre Dame.
Well, that might be one that got away to the earlier conversation.
Yeah. That was Mike Elko. That was Mike Elko's staff. You know what I mean?
Well, George has developed into a very good starting defensive end for the Kansas City Chiefs and is going to be playing in the Super Bowl in 2 weeks.
It was a first-round pick. Wasn't he taken at the end of round 1, or did he fall to round 2?
31 overall, I believe, or 32 overall. Yeah, 32 overall. Should have been drafted a little higher, but yeah, he's a really good player.
Good questions. Here, I got this one. Oh, actually, you go ahead and answer this one ask this one because I do want to answer this.
Okay. Salty says, Ryan, from the I'm afraid to ask category, why have you not detailed Al Golden's travel in your Notre Dame coaches on the road updates? Is he traveling to Nashville, Tennessee?
No, this has nothing to do with NFL interviews. It is a personal issue that we're not even going to hint about. It's nothing bad. There's just it's hard to say. It has nothing to do with him interviewing for NFL jobs. So we did find out what that's about. It's just, it'll eventually come out, but it has nothing there's nothing negative. It's nothing bad happened with him. There's no issues there. There's no NFL interviews that he's going on. It has nothing to do with that kind of stuff. So just kind of, take that and be patient, let it play out, but it has nothing to do with whether or not Al Golden is going to be at Notre Dame, wants to be at Notre Dame, or anything like that. Just let it play out. It's all good.
And Salty, it's not on the post because he's not on the road. Okay.
That's right.
Yeah. He's not on the road, so I'm not reporting about him being on the road, Salty. Jeez.
That's kind of the point about it. Yes. IGK also says, if Jamie French takes another visit, how does that change Notre Dame's chances with him, in your opinion? How about if he takes another visit, we'll address it. I mean, if he takes another visit, it means that he has interest in Notre Dame. If not, then he doesn't. So, I mean, I'm not trying to be flippant. It's just that simple. And he's not really worth discussing until he visits, because he has been on campus before and he just wasn't that super interested. So,
JPEL12, not completely on topic, but do you guys think there was any other avenue other than NIL in the portal that would have been enhanced variance in decisions of top players?
Better enhanced it? No, I don't think so. I mean, I think those are two.
Can we change the weather? I mean, am I a wizard? Can I change
just
the weather?
Overall, like top players? I mean, no. I mean, look, guys, the stuff that's driven those players' decisions but in the past is driving those players' decisions now. Kids who are making decisions based on money now, or kids that were making decisions based on money before. It's just out there now. It's more open now. So like that. That's it. The portal isn't like a impacting players' decisions as much as it's just an opportunity for them to get out of decisions that they didn't like sooner and easier and more freely, which I don't particularly care much for, but it is what it is. But no, I don't think. I mean, no, but again, I would even say other than NIL, it's not NIL that's driving these decisions. It's pay for play. That's what's driving these decisions. Yes. It's pay for play for these top players. That's what it is. It's not NIL. NIL is not what we're seeing. What happened with Jaden Rashad at Florida had nothing to do with name, image, and likeness. Nothing. Because name, image, likeness gets him nowhere near the money they were offering him. Nowhere close to it. Yeah. It was, 13 million. We're just going to buy him. And they thought he's just some dumb kid that when he gets here, we'll give him some excuse why we didn't pay him. And it's too late. He's already here. And that's where the portal can change things. So you can say, F that. I'm not signing with you. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not going to play for you now. I'm going to do something different. And, they basically just lied. And I kind of hope Florida gets hammered for this, to be honest with you, a little bit, to where one of two things are going to have to happen. Number one, they sign the deal and they're forced to pay him, which, good. I mean, do I think it's absurd that he got offered that kind of money? It's stupid. He got offered that, but you offered it. Stick to your word and pay it.
Was it a contract though? That would be my main
Apparently
question.
There was a contract involved. Yes, he signed it. But the thing that they're saying is, this is the debate. Now, again, I don't know the particulars, so I'm just telling you of what is this. They offered him a deal, signed a deal. And what they're saying now is that Florida is basically, because it's a collective that I think is now defunct, I believe. Okay. But basically, they said that it was indicative of him coming to Florida. That's illegal. You're not allowed to do that. You're not allowed to sign. You're not allowed to do contracts that are geared towards you have to pick this school or the contract or we won't pay you this. That's not allowed.
Yeah,
right.
Yep.
And so basically what they're saying is either Florida broke the rules and did that, or the contract didn't have specific language you have to go to Florida in it, which means they still have to pay them the money.
Right.
So either they either own the money or they broke a major rule and are going to get hammered. And so that's kind of where we're at.
It'd be pretty crazy if they pay him that much money just to not play for Florida. That'd be pretty wild. Wild, but yeah.
Yeah, it would very much be wild. So I have my phone turned off because, we're doing the show, and my wife is currently in Puerto Rico. So she does a stinking FaceTime, which goes on my computer. That's what that sound was. So I apologize, everyone. So, yes. But, that Florida, that's going to be very interesting to see what happens. Because, this is what I've been told this by a lot of people that are involved with college programs. These collectives are just offering these kids this money, and then when they show up, they're stiffing them. They're late in payments. They're not giving them the money they're supposed to give them, and that's the problem with all this. And so, this kid's an idiot. He's just doing this, or and I'm like, guys, it's not. Don't just always. Sometimes it is. It's not always that simple. It's not always just the kid is jumping in. Sometimes it's, hey, I was offered this amount of money, and then I get there and you're not paying me. Not only is that, it's not, well, I'm leaving because you're not paying me. That's a break of trust.
Right.
I came to play for you for this reason, and now you're not honoring your end of the deal, but I'm supposed to honor my end of the deal and still play? That's not how this works, right? I don't think you should be offering those kids that kind of money just to come and play. It should be related to some sort of exchange of services, right? I'll give you NIL money if you do commercials for me, or you come show up at this thing for me, or you do, that's what it's supposed to be for me. Some sort of brand representation. And I've said this, if Caleb Williams is worth $10 million to advertisers to do different things, then he is worth $10 million. Right. But he shouldn't be worth $10 million to some collective who just wants him to come play quarterback for them. That's what I don't like. But if you're going to offer these kids this money, then there should be a mechanism in place that if you don't pay those kids the money that you signed them, that you agreed to pay them for, then you should get hammered. And but the problem is these contracts are very, if you talk, I can't stand how much lawyers are involved in this whole process. And I think they're ruining all this. However, there is a need for legal representation because some of these NIL contracts are completely garbage and 100% skewed towards the school and the collective, where they can basically say, hey, we can void this at any time for any reason. Well, that's ridiculous. That's not a real contract at that point in time. I can just decide Ryan, I don't feel like paying you this month. Well, it's in the contract that I can do this. Well, it'd be different if you sign that you're a 30-something-year-old grown man with kids. But you're doing this with 16, 17, 18-year-olds. You're trying to take advantage of them. And it's a jacked up system, and I hate it. And that's the stuff that needs to get fixed. There needs to be more. That's why there needs to be more stuff that's regulated. I'm not a big fan of regulation. I'm not a big fan of over-regulation. But this notion that there shouldn't be any regulation. It's like when you talk economics, I get friends of mine on the right, and they'll be like, oh, there should be no regulation. Man, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard of. Because if there's no regulation, then it's the wild, wild west. And there needs to be regulation, but it needs to be this type that allows for more freedom to do this and invest in this and this. You can't have no regulation. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard of. Right? Because like, 5-year-olds working for me. You know what I mean? Because they, it's like, this is the stupidest thing I've ever heard of. But you also don't want to over-regulate. And right now, they're erring on the side of under-regulation. My fear, however, Ryan, is when they fix it, it's going to then go into over-regulation. And then we're going to be back to the drawing board. And there's going to be now legal fights about that. It just sucks because this whole process just sucks, in my opinion.
I wish I could get $13 million to not go to Gainesville, Florida.
Know, right?
That'd be fun.
And if they have to pay him that's what they get. That's what they get.
We had Leighton Borkholder. Hey, Brian and Ryan, what do you think that the chances are that Devin Ford is still on the roster in August?
I mean, it depends on how the spring goes. Right now, Leighton, and I'm not trying to duck your question because I just don't want to give odds because I don't know. because it's going to depend on what kind of jump does Devin make this year. Like, look, he's going to be going into, year 2 at Notre Dame, and he's got some ability as well. Like maybe he passes up Jabron Payne for that third down running back role. It's not, I don't think he'll do it, but it's not out of the realm of possibility. And if that's the case, then guess what? He'll be back in the fall. And if he doesn't, then he may not be. I hope he stays. I do. I like Devin Ford. The thing I like about Devin Ford is, Ryan, you know what he did this year at Notre Dame? It's a former top 100 recruit. And you know what he said? What basically his attitude was in Notre Dame this year? Devin, what do you want to do this year? Whatever you need, coach.
Choose hard. Choose hard.
Whatever. Yep. Whatever you need me to do, coach. You need me to run down on kickoffs. You need me to be the kick returner. I'll be the kick returner. You need me to be the lead blocker on kick returns. I'll be the lead blocker on kick returns. You need me to catch the ball, block, run, whatever. I'll do whatever you need, coach. There's value in that type of personality. You know what I mean? Because like if this 6-year guy is out there just grinding every day, guess what that means for Keedron Young and Jabron Payne and these Swims? They got to grind every day as well.
Right.
I think there's value in that if you can make the scholarships work.
Yeah,
that's the thing for me.
Just Notre Dame. Don't ask him to return kicks this year, please. All due respect.
Well,
don't ask.
I think once they got they went out and got Jaden Harrison. I think that was kind of not gonna be an option, right?
Yes, please.
Yeah.
Chris W., I remember on a previous show you said Tommy Rees wasn't considered to stay at Alabama because his offense is different than Kalen DeBoer's offense. What is the difference between the two offenses? Oh man, how long you got on this?
I don't believe that's what we said though. Tommy Rees runs a pro style, a pro style offense is basically what Tommy Rees does. Okay, Kalen DeBoer is more of a spread coach, right? But it's more so of the staff is already in place, basically. I mean, and what I also said was I don't think the relationship that Tommy Rees kind of had during the interview process with Jamarcus Shepard is going to mean that he's not going to have an ally in the room for, hey, let's keep Tommy Rees on board. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's just a completely different type of offense, but it just pro style, physical run game, tight end oriented, middle of the field oriented throwing game towards spread. I mean, I don't think it's an air raid, but it's more air raid than it is pro style from a structural standpoint.
It's got air raid principles.
Yeah. Air raid principles, yeah. So it's just polar opposites in that regard. Now, Tommy Rees could coach in that offense. He's a smart guy. He can adapt and get into that offense. It's just why? If you're Kalen DeBoer, why would you want that?
When you already have Ryan Grubb and Shepard coming over.
Right, like exactly. And yourself. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. It's just
and then from there, how would you make Tommy Rees fit? Like quarterback coach? Like Tommy Rees is going to be demoted to a quarterback coach and stay. Like that's not going to happen.
Nor should he. Absolutely right.
This wasn't going to be reasonable. Yep.
Here's an NFL one, Ryan. I'll read this one. Hey, Ryan, your NFL question. You're the GM of the Lions. What moves are you making this offseason? I'm trading Hutchinson for help in the secondary ASAP. Interested to hear your thoughts.
Well, I can tell you one thing I'm not doing is trading Aiden Hutchinson for help in the secondary ASAP. All due respect, but there are other avenues to find secondary help, and I understand why that isn't the thought process. But Aiden Hutchinson's a top 5 to 7 edge player in the NFL right now, and you have him on a rookie contract. Like I'm not trading that guy. Absolutely not. For me, I think that you need to get another secondary pass catcher. I think we saw Amon-Ra St. Brown is a stud, really good football player. Jamison Williams has moments, isn't there yet, but if we get one more wide receiver to replace kind of the Josh Reynolds role in the offense, then you're cooking with grease. You have 2 good running backs already. You have your quarterback in place. Offensive line is very good for the most part. So aside from that, like you just need another secondary pass catcher that's more dependable. Defensively, I think that you need a partner to go along with Aiden Hutchinson. I think that a guy on the other side, I saw a crazy stat. I don't know the numbers for like off the top of my head completely, but on the season coming into yesterday's game, Aiden Hutchinson had 118 quarterback hurries on the year in total, including playoffs. The next closest on the line was Aleem McNeil, who's a defensive tackle, who had 40. So just think about that. 118 to 40. That is a massive drop-off. So I think you need to try to find more pass rushing help on the other side of Aiden Hutchinson. So other secondary pass rusher, secondary pass catcher, and then some cornerback help, especially. Like I think that you really need an outside corner Sutton is a solid little player, but I think he'd be better served as a nickel kind of flex player. You have Brian Branch in the nickel, who's a really good football player. So I'm attacking outside corner. I'm attacking secondary pass catcher. I'm attacking secondary rusher. But outside of that, honestly, what's the big thing in the offseason? You're probably going to lose Ben Johnson, your offensive coordinator, to a head coaching job. He's kind of been linked to Washington a ton. So you need to find the next wave of a really good offensive coordinator. And you need to find those kind of secondary pieces to keep this thing sustained.
Josh Reynolds killed them yesterday in the second half.
Yeah, he was bad yesterday.
It's
a shame because Josh was actually pretty solid this year for the most part for Detroit, but yesterday he had a terrible game. Yes,
awful second half.
Yeah.
To me, I look at them, I'm like, you got Amon-Ra St. Brown and what he can do, and you got a speedy guy in Jameson Williams, and you've got Sam Laporta. Like, if they could get like a longer, like you said, dependable, bigger type of body type at receiver to complement that, that'd be really nice to see. Like that's something that I could see them doing. Do they have a first-round draft pick?
I believe they do. Yeah.
Let me ask you this question.
I don't see how they.
So they'll be picking like what, 29th right now, right? It'd be them and then the Ravens.
Yes. Yep.
Let's say a guy like Keon Coleman or Brian Thomas falls that far, based on certain mock drafts. Keon Coleman's going to be late. I'm just body type wise.
Yeah.
Would you think it would be wise for them to use a first-round pick on a wide receiver if that kind of guy falls to them?
Yeah. Yeah. If someone like that's there, I think that's physicality is what they absolutely need. So, yeah, if there's a pass catcher with that type of body type, I would be more like if Keon Coleman and Brian Thomas were both on the board, I would be okay with either one, but I would lean towards Keon Coleman just because he's more of the physical pass catcher. Brian Thomas is long and can run, but you also have Jameson Williams, who kind of is the long, well, not long, but like super. I mean, he can run for days. Obviously, he's your vertical element. Yeah. So if you can get a bigger body pass catcher that can kind of be a dependable guy, I think that would take that offense next level. But honestly, I think defense is more of my concern. I just think getting into secondary pass catcher would be a big move this offseason as well.
That's the thing that I bring up receiver. I don't, based on what I saw the last 2 weeks, I don't disagree that getting some help in the secondary and getting a secondary pass rusher are important things for the Lions. Yep. But I look at this draft class and just some of the receivers on it. You could see a really good receiver falling to where it's like the value at that pick at 29 is just like, how do we turn that down?
Yeah. So I think corner could be that way too. Like I think there's a world that like a Kalen King from Penn State could even fall potentially to that spot where it's just like, cool.
My thought on that was, Ryan, just a very rough look at this, and I want to get you to respond to it because I know you studied more. I kind of felt like corner's a position where if I was late first round, I might even wait because there's some really good like day 2 corners as well. It just will depend on what else is there. You know what I mean?
Depends on depends where the runs start too. I would say. I mean, like, does the wide receiver run start outside of Marvin Harrison Jr.? Do we see 2 or 3 others in the top 10? Right. Cornerback, when exactly does the run at corner starts? I mean, there's a lot of variables obviously that could go
because and you know this, what's fun about the draft is you don't know when it's going to be because the run could start early and then now they all get bumped up, or people could say, well, we're going to hold off because it's so deep. And then those guys get pushed back and the run starts later. That's the fascinating thing about how these drafts go sometimes. It's like the depth sometimes can cause an early run. Like, remember, it was a quarterback was like that the year Ian Book got drafted. Like, the quarterback run started so early that, like, Kellen Mond got moved up, Davis Mills got moved up, Ian Book got moved up because that early day 2 run started so hard that it just bumped everybody up. Sometimes it can happen where they kind of, because it's so deep, it's like, well, we can get a guy that we don't need to use a first-round pick there because it's so deep. We can get a day 2 guy there. And so it's going to be fascinating to see it. And which deep position does the run start on first? That's the other part of it. Like, so is it corner or is it receiver? Because it's usually not both because there's still so many values. There's tackles and ends. And exactly. It's going to be interesting. It's going to be very interesting. That's part of the
obviously
fun
we're talking. Yeah, we're always talking about scenarios before the free agency even happens too. Where it's just like a lot can happen from here until the draft as well. You know, like a lot of it's going to change.
Absolutely.
So we'll see. We had Ball Peen Shillelagh. Well, that's an interesting one. If you were Coach Freeman, what are 3 areas that you would emphasize more to bring Notre Dame closer to a championship?
More dynamic offense, number 1.
Yep.
You need to get the strength and conditioning program figured out. I mean, because whatever the reason why Matt Bayless was gone after last year, how you replace him is going to go a long way towards determining if Marcus Freeman can win a championship or not. That's the other part of it. And then the third part is you have to create a more hungry culture. I just feel like there's and this is a unique Notre Dame problem. It is, Ryan, because you can have tremendous success at Notre Dame and never do much playing football because of what Notre Dame offers. I've heard Notre Dame coaches complain about this in the past. Like, this guy's just not hungry because he's perfectly happy just where he is because he's going to get a Notre Dame degree and he's going to go make a lot of money. And so he's content where, let's be honest, some kids at other schools are like, dude, if football doesn't work out, this kid doesn't know what the heck he's going to do with his life. So you have to, like, one thing Lou Holtz did a good job of is creating that hunger to be great at football, even though the rest of life is kind of not too bad for me right now. You know what I mean? And so creating that really hungry culture that includes competitiveness, all this kind of stuff, that's going to be a big thing for them. Like, how bad do you guys want it? Right. Do you guys really want to dig deep? Are you guys really willing to give up smoking weed or going out or doing this or doing that or whatever to really focus on being a great football player or part of a great football team? Those are all questions that have to get asked about this football team. And it's a culture thing. And so that's why I say that dynamic offense is number one thing that has to get addressed. The strength program has to get figured out. And then can he create a hungry culture? That's going to be the third question. And then, like, within other things, it's like, okay, your defense is already really good. Can you enhance certain areas? Get better edge rushers and all that. But the defense is already still pretty good. Those are the things where I think a pure change needs to happen. And so those would be the top three for me. Very, very good question. Jeremy Maxwell asks, being a huge Quentin Nelson fan, just curious who your opinion on the best offensive lineman at each position at Notre Dame. So we've kind of been asked this question in different ways before. So this is what I would do, Jeremy, is I'd give you like my all-time starting five at Notre Dame, and all-time for me when it comes to offensive linemen is more so like early 90s. I know that Andy Heck was really good, but I don't remember like Andy Heck like I do Todd Light and Rocket Ismail. So like early 90s on, what would be my all-time Notre Dame starting lineup? And it's a tough one, man, because I'm going to have to move guys around because they can't all play the same position. But here would be my five, and I've changed it. It's evolved over time. But I have Quentin Nelson at left guard. I would have Aaron Taylor at right guard. I would have Jeff Fain at center. I would have Zach Martin at left tackle. And I'm trying to think of who my right tackle is. It's you got Ronnie Stanley, you got Mike McGlinchey, you got Liam Eichenberg, you got Mike Rosenthal, you got Luke Pettigout, you got Ryan Harris. Yeah, it's a little bit of a tougher one there. I'd probably lean towards McGlinchey at right tackle because he in college he was a more physical run blocker. But what Ronnie Stanley has turned into in the pros, if you could get that version at Notre Dame, then it'd probably be Ronnie at right tackle. Just thinking about it from my lifetime, but those would probably be my picks. So Q at left guard, Aaron Taylor at right guard, Jeff Fain at center, Zach Martin at left tackle, and either McGlinchey, Stanley, or Liam Eichenberg at right tackle. I'd probably go with McGlinchey or Stanley because I thought they had – like Liam had a great fight. I would argue that Liam's last year at Notre Dame was better than any year Ronnie had individually or better than anything Mike McGlinchey did individually. But McGlinchey had two really good seasons at Notre Dame. Ronnie had two really good seasons at Notre Dame. And Liam just had the one. He was solid in his other years, but he wasn't quite as dominant as those guys were, in my opinion. So those are fun questions to have. Lucky Duck asks the question, which 2024 recruit do you hope you are most wrong about? This is a good one. Defensively, Sean Silviano and Tabron Benny Powell are two guys I hope I am dead wrong about. I don't think that I'm dead wrong about Teddy Rizak because I like Teddy Rizak's ability. It's just, okay, can he fill out or not? I think he's a lot of ability. But if I could say defensively which two I'm most wrong about, I hope I'm dead wrong about Sean Silviano, and I hope I'm dead wrong about Tabron Benny Powell. On offense, That's a tough one because actually it's not a tough one because the only guy that I'm not super high on offense is Anthony Knapp. I hope I'm wrong on Anthony Knapp, and I actually hope this is one where On Three's crazy rankings are correct. They view him as a top 100 guy. That's one that I hope I'm wrong on because of Anthony Knapp. Because I do like Ryan. You and I were talking about this before the show. I do like the athleticism. I do like the physical. He is that was the biggest surprise to me when I watched this film was how physical he was. Yeah. Because he's, when you think 6'4", 265 left tackle, Ryan, your first thought is, oh, he's going to be a really athletic kid. And he is. But he fights, he competes. And so if I'm wrong on him, he's got a chance to be think of how Jarrett Patterson was, but more athletic and more powerful. That's to me what I could see Anthony Knapp being if I'm wrong on him. And he can fill out and get to where he needs to get to and those type of things. That's a pretty good flipping player, right? A more athletic, physical version of Jarrett Patterson's a pretty good football player. Didn't Jarrett Patterson play like 400 snaps this year as a rookie? I think I read somewhere for a team that went to the playoffs. So that's the one on offense I hope I'm the most wrong about.
Mm-hmm. Offensively, it's Styles Prescott for me. I just have concerns. I have concerns over him getting a little tight as he puts too much weight on potentially too quickly. We'll see if that translates or not. I don't know. We'll see. Styles Prescott would be offensively. Defensively, it would be Cole Mullins for me, probably. Notre Dame needs to continue to get better on the edges as far as being more impactful. I like Cole, the baseline, as like a physical edge setter guy that can play the run game a ton. I just don't necessarily see pass rush upside there.
You see more Junior Chialamaka, basically, is what you're saying. Like what you said earlier about Junior. You don't think he's going to add much from a pass rush standpoint, but he's a physical kid that can do things on the edge, right?
I think he'll be a really good player in the run game and be that baseline good player. I just don't know if I see crazy upside as a pass rusher. So, those would be my guys.
For me, Tabron, because if he's good, then I feel a lot better about the safety position. I mean, that's the big thing for me.
He took a nice jump as a senior, man. He took a nice jump. So hopefully he takes another big jump. We'll see, though.
We shall see. He's going to need one, to me, for my opinion, of what he is to play at Notre Dame. And that's why I hope I'm wrong about him. But there's not a lot of guys in this class I'm down on, Ryan. That's the thing is like.
Oh, Kenny Urlacher would be another one for me. I hope I'm wrong about Kenny
for the same reasons that I would assume that I'm wrong on Tabron Benny Powell. Look, if the safety needs these guys to pan out. The depth chart needs these guys to pan out. That's what it comes down to.
Agreed.
Yeah. Guys, there's just part of the thing I love about this class. I mean, look, I know I have this guy ranked 9th in the class, but like, guys, these guys that are ranking like 8th and 9th in the class on each side of the ball are guys that would have ranked in the top 3 in a lot of other classes. Like, that's the thing. And so it's like, these guys are pretty good. There aren't that many I'm down on. And so that makes it a little bit tougher than other years.
Got Michael Johnson. Everyone has KM being passed. Oh, Kenny Minchie being passed up by CJ Carr. What are the chances that Kenny Minchie could be the number 2 quarterback after the spring with the new offensive coordinator?
Well, I think it's possible. I mean, look, I can't speak for everybody else. I'm going to speak for myself. I don't think it's assumed that CJ Carr is going to beat out Kenny Minchie. I've never said that. I mean, so.
Well, are they asking, though? They're asking if Kenny Minchie. Oh, wait. Well, they're also asking if Kenny Minchie can leap.
Right.
Steven
I'm talking about
Jelly,
the first part of it. Yeah. So to me, I don't think it's assumed that CJ is going to pass up Kenny, especially this season. The question of whether can Kenny pass up Steve Angeli, that's a legitimate question. Will he be given the chance? I don't know the answer to that because, as you know, Ryan, a lot of coaches really like experience, and Kenny's not going to have anywhere close to the experience. No matter what happens this year, Kenny will never have the experience that Steve Angeli has until they give him a chance to earn that. That's basically what it boils down to. So, and then for Kenny, you've got to go out and seize it. That's the thing is like you can't you're not going to beat out Steve Angeli just because you have great arm talent. It's about what's the work you put in the weight room starting now. What's the extra work you put in? What leadership traits do you show? Because one of the things about Steve Angeli that the coaches like is this kid shows leadership traits. Does Kenny take sort of a back seat from that standpoint, or does he start to assert himself? So it's not like because if it just comes down to who can spin it the best, Kenny Minchie would have already passed up Steve Angeli because there is no debate to me when it comes to just who throws a better ball. Kenny by far. You could argue that Kenny might throw a better ball than anybody on the roster next year, including CJ, just as far as what it looks like coming out of his hand. Yeah. He's got, just really good arm talent, but that's not even close to all you need to show as a quarterback to become a starter or pass somebody up. Because to be the backup quarterback, you've got to be viewed as, if this guy goes down, you're our guy.
Yeah.
And if they don't trust you to have those other leadership tools and work ethic tools and knowledge tools and things like that, which I don't think would be a problem, because we've heard Kenny's wicked smart, but he's not a real assertive personality. That's always going to be the big holdup for Kenny. Can he be assertive enough to say in a crowded quarterback room, no, coach, I'm that dude? That's the question. And if he can show that this year, the arm talent is outstanding, Ryan. There's no doubt about that. So that's going to be the big question. What are the chances? I don't know about chances, but I'll say this: it can certainly happen if he can show those things. There's no doubt. I won't be surprised if Kenny or CJ pass up Steve Angeli, but I also won't be completely shocked if if Steve holds them off.
Yeah.
I hope not, but I think it's possible.
Yeah, I mean, Steve showed obviously a lot in the bowl game. People rave about his character and just the competitor he is. So if he ends up being the backup, I wouldn't be shocked at all. If he ends up getting passed up by one of the younger, more talented players, it wouldn't shock me either. I'm more concerned, honestly, about not even this year as much. I mean, it'll be nice to get a couple of those guys some game time experience, hopefully, in this season, but honestly, this is a conversation that we're going to be having a lot, not this offseason, the next offseason, because that's when there should be a legitimate competition on the table for a starting job, potentially. So
Mike Huff, who's now down, his name is now Bear Down Shoulders. I completely forgot about Joe Alt. Completely forgot about Joe Alt. I was asked the question, basically, what were the best positions, like best guard, center, tackle. So I put together my starting 5 on the Notre Dame offensive line, and I had Quentin Nelson at left guard, Aaron Taylor at right guard, Jeff Fain at center, Zach Martin at left tackle, and either McGlinchey or Stanley at right tackle. Just completely forgot about Joe Alt.
Yeah.
Joe Alt's at left tackle, Zach Martin's at right tackle, and it's done deal. I completely forgot about it. Because when I was asked this question a year ago, it was only guys that had played before. And so I kind of already had it in my head that that's where it was. Completely forgot about Joe Alt. So, yes, Joe Alt's my left tackle, and especially after this season.
It's pretty funny that in about 5 years, when people are asking us about all-time greats, we'll be talking about Joe Alt, as far as like reminiscing. Oh, yeah, Joe Alt. That guy was pretty good, man. Pretty good. Pretty good player.
He was. Yeah, so my bad on that completely. I was thinking about guys from the past and forgot about the present. So, yes, Joe Alt is my left tackle on that team. Zach Martin, that's a heck of an offensive line, Ryan. Jeff Fain at center, Aaron Taylor, Quentin Nelson at guard, and Joe Alt and Zach Martin at tackle. Whew. And I will say Zach Martin at tackle because I thought Zach Martin was phenomenal in Notre Dame. I know he didn't get the All-American status, but he didn't get drafted in the number 16 overall in the draft at his size because he didn't have great film at Notre Dame. Like, let's be honest about that, right? Like, he had great film. And if he had more of a tackle body, he would have gone higher. But because he was viewed as a shorter, lengthwise interior guy, that he fell a little bit further. But his 13 season at Notre Dame was outstanding. And he was pretty flipping good in 2011 and 2012 also. Yep. So, yes. But Joe Alt was a freak.
I felt like he played forever at Notre Dame, too. Zach Martin.
4-year starter. Yeah, 4-year starter. Yep. You don't see that a whole lot. Yeah. Speaking of Joe Alt, that's what made me think of I needed to remind that I needed to adjust my list a little bit.
Lucky Ducks 512. Lots of people picking the Titans as the landing spot for Joe Alt. Thoughts on that being his landing spot? I mean, they need one of the big 3 offensive tackles. They need it desperately. Right now, today stands. I was talking about this the other day with someone. The starting offensive tackles for the Tennessee Titans in 2024, as of right now, without free agency put into it, Nicholas Petit-Frere at left tackle. The right tackle is Chris Clark, I think. I forget. But then their backups are, who was the one? It was Andre Dillard, and then the other backup offensive tackle was Dylan Radins. Guys, that offensive line stinks. I mean, to be very honest, that line stinks. Nicholas Petit-Frere is not very good. Chris Hubbard, I'm sorry, was the right tackle. But Chris Hubbard, should not start in the NFL. Andre Dillard should be a swing player in the NFL, not a starter. And Dylan Radin should not start in the NFL. So you have one guy that maybe is a starting offensive tackle, maybe in the NFL right now. Tennessee Titans are in a bad situation offensive tackle-wise. They need to get one of Joe Alt, preferred, Olu Fashanu, Penn State, or Talise Fuaga out of Oregon State. They need to get one of those big three offensive tackles, or else they're in a tough spot.
It is so disappointing what he has. I haven't watched him in the NFL, but you're not the first person that told me that Nicholas Petitfrere has not been very good in the NFL.
Oh, he stinks. Just like he was at Ohio State. Not very good.
It's so disappointing because he was so good coming out of high school and was pretty good early in his career at Ohio State. This is an example of why you have to be careful with how much weight you put on players, because there becomes a breaking point. And the thing that people think, Ryan, is, well, if you put too much weight on a guy, you just get that weight off. No. Sometimes once you go past a certain point, they don't recover that athleticism. They just don't. And he's an example of that. Mo Stovall is an example of that too. He got better when he lost all the weight, but he never got the type of athleticism he had early in his career back when they put too much weight on him. But yeah, that's a bummer. How'd he play for them?
Skronsky was good at left guard. Yeah, he's a good player. Dude,
Okay.
Easy eval. Like,
what's wild is
player. Shocker.
A lot of the guys you're talking about were high draft picks. I mean, Andre Dillard was a first-round draft pick.
Yeah, he was
Dylan Ray Duns is a second-round draft pick. Yeah. Wasn't Nicholas Petitfrere? He was a second-round pick, a second or third-round pick, right?
Third-round
pick.
Yeah, I think third round. Yeah.
So, it's wild.
Yep. Joseph Barrett, Brian, Ohio State is basically trying to buy a national championship. How dangerous is this model regarding the competitive balance with college football?
I mean, I don't think it's dangerous at all from a competitive balance standpoint. I mean, because you're seeing other teams buying players. I mean, Miami bought one of the top quarterbacks in the portal. He didn't go to Bama. He didn't go to Ohio State. I mean, Cameron. I mean, well, I'll ask you, Ryan, who's a better player? Forget the personality and some of the red flags you and I both have about him, but who would have been a more impactful quarterback at Ohio State? Will Howard or Cameron Ward?
Oh, Cameron Ward.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, why didn't they get him? They weren't willing to meet the asking price, right? I mean, so it's not just that they're throwing money out to the best players. I mean, they are trying to build a team. And people have asked, well, why would you go out and get Quinshon Judkins? Because your elite back, your elite talent at running back right now, Trayvon Henderson, has never been able to be healthy, right? I mean, freshman he was, but you need a number back. I mean, they're trying to buy a title, but they're not doing anything different than everybody else is doing. I mean, Georgia's trying to buy a title too. They're just buying high school players instead of college players. That's no different. You know what I mean? Yeah. You don't think Georgia's not paying for these high school kids they're getting? Of course they are. They're just choosing not to throw that kind of money around in the portal. Same with Alabama. So all these teams are trying to buy players. It's just they're trying to buy players in different ways. So I don't think it's dangerous, to be honest with you. I mean, it's kind of what everybody's doing. If Ohio State wasn't doing this, then people would be bitching that they're Clemson. Like everyone, Clemson's not engaging in this and not engaging in that. They're missing, and it's like, well, we all complain that we don't like this system, and then we want to bash the only head coach at a major school that's not willing to engage in that system as if he's some kind of idiot. It's like, well, pick a lane, guys. You know what I mean? But like, you talk about competitive balance. I mean, is Ole Miss a team that people are viewing as a top 10 program next year if they couldn't buy players in the way that they're buying players right now? Does anybody think that? Is Louisville go from what they were to what they are now if they couldn't go out and buy players? No. So if anything, one of the things that this has done more than I thought it would, Ryan, is it has created more competitive balance in college football because Kentucky can go out there and buy players to be better. Missouri can go out there and buy players away from Oklahoma. Miami can go buy players, and so you're seeing more of this to where I think it's actually creating more competitive balance as opposed to Ohio State's going to, and the other thing too, Ryan, is I don't think that the moves they made all of a sudden made Ohio State like this juggernaut that no one's going to be able to beat next year. Caleb Downs was a phenomenal pickup. Julian Sang will be a good pickup in time. I don't think these other moves all of a sudden mean Ohio State's going to be more talented than they were 2 years ago, because I don't think they're going to be more talented than they were 2 years ago when they lost to Georgia in the playoffs. So Will Howard's not in the same universe as CJ Stroud as a quarterback.
Sure.
So I don't think it's I mean, I don't have a problem with what Ohio State's doing because it's in the rules. This is the rules now. And they were not happy with the season they had, and they're going out there and trying to find players that make them better. Good. That's what you should do. Michigan did that. I mean, Michigan got a lot of transfers last couple of years. They weren't the high-profile guys as much as really good fits for what they're trying to do, but like they have plenty of transfers in their starting lineup this past year. So, I mean, it's –
I think the only dangerous thing that some programs are doing is that they just rely completely on the portal. And I think that's dangerous for the health of a program. I mean, Ohio State only has 6 pickups in the portal, right? Literally less than Notre Dame. So it's not like they're just, our team stinks.
And one's a true freshman.
Offload and
right. One will be a true freshman.
I don't think they're offloading and just supplementing a roster with a bunch of transfer portal kids. Like that's not what they're doing. They're trying to fill in gaps with impact players. And okay. Cool. Right. I think regardless, like even if let's say all 6 just don't do it for Ohio State for whatever reason, the odds are obviously very low there. But if they're off the team after 1 year, it's like it's only 6 players. You know what I mean? Like you can make
and
that
Ohio
happen.
State's still pretty talented. Like to your example, Ryan, I think Florida State's getting into a very dangerous territory right now. Yes. Now, I like some of the pickups they made this offseason. I think Florida State's going to have a talented team. But what we don't know is what kind of team. No, let me rephrase. They're going to have a talented roster. What I don't know is what kind of team they're going to have. Louisville is having that issue right now. Is this sustainable? Like, go look at how many high school kids Louisville signed this year. It's a very small number. That's the big question for me is I don't know if it's healthy for those teams to do that. To just year after year just be – and the problem is once you dip into that in a big way, you have to keep doing it to field a roster. Yeah. You know, once you go out and get 20 portal guys, you can't replace that next year with nothing but high school kids because otherwise you're going to have half your roster is going to be freshmen and redshirt freshmen. That's not really where you want, or more than half. That's not really where you want to be. So to me, I think your point is right, Ryan, where this is more of a concern for certain teams. Ole Miss is going to have a lot of talent on their roster next year. What kind of team are they going to have? I don't know. I've never seen these guys play together. Michigan State's a perfect example. After 2021, they didn't stop going to get portal guys. It's just the portal guys weren't as good. And the team wasn't as effective as what they had done the year before when they were really good. And that's why teams like Michigan and Georgia and Alabama and Notre Dame and Ohio State are taking more of we're going to plug holes with the best possible player we can get as opposed to wholesale roster moves. Michigan's done that. You throw Michigan in that conversation as well. And I think that's the way that the portal needs to go if you're deep into your tenure. I do understand some coaches taking over at new schools and they want to do all that. And sometimes like you have to because so many of your players left when the previous coach left. I get all that. Like Brian Kelly had to go to the portal his first year. Like I'll give Brian Kelly credit.
To field a team.
He has continued to more and more transition to high school recruiting. But he also says, hey, we got to go get portal guys because we have to field a roster our first couple of years. But we're trying to build to being more high school oriented when then the portal fills needs. That's what they're trying to get to. That's a fair strategy to employ when you inherit a team where most of your roster, half your roster left when the previous coach was fired. Yeah. He had no choice to go to the portal. But he has had a strategy there that Lincoln Riley has failed to adopt at USC. That's why Brian Kelly, to me, will have more consistency at LSU than Lincoln Riley's going to have at USC. Because Brian Kelly's trying to build it the right way, which is using both, where Lincoln Riley is just constantly going for the quick fix. And I don't think that's sustainable, in my opinion. Dan Lanning's doing it the same way, in my opinion. Like, he's going to the portal for impact players, but he's not building his roster through the portal. He's landing top 10 recruiting classes in high school and then fitting portal guys into the needs that they have. I think that's the best way to go, and I think that's what Ohio State's doing. And I don't have a problem with it. We can maybe be critical of some of the specific moves. I don't think Seth McLaughlin is like your only O-lineman in the portal is going to move that's not an upgrade for you over Carson Hinsman, in my opinion. But
I hope they're going to put him I hope they're going to put him in a guard spot and not move Hinsman off of center.
Are you thinking he's going to have – because this game against Michigan was not the first time all year he's had the yips. as a snapper.
McLaughlin's played guard in the past at Alabama,
Yeah.
so I'm assuming that he's probably going to be a guard competition at the other spot. Matt Jones is leaving.
Yeah.
That's my assumption.
So, and then you'd have that. Now you have a decent interior with Donovan Jackson and Carson Hinsman, and then McLaughlin if he doesn't have to snap. But to me, that's what Ohio State's doing is reasonable. We could debate on, is this guy going to move the needle or not? Should you have gone after this position or that position? But what they're doing makes total sense in the modern landscape. And they'd be foolish not to do that. Why would they not want to go get Caleb Downs? Of course you want Caleb Downs. Now, you have to buy him to get him there. Okay, that's fine. But that's the rules. That's where we are. But why would you not want Caleb Downs on your football team? Why would you, Quinshon Judkins let's take the off-the-field rumors that we've heard, because I don't know about, why would you not want to have a guy like him complimenting TreVeyon Henderson, who's struggled to stay healthy, on your football team? To me, there's some sense that it makes. You've already lost Chip Trayanum. You've lost Mayan Williams. You get yourself a guy that's good. He's not a big play guy, but he's a bulk guy to complement with your home run hitter in TreVeyon, and that takes some of that burden off of TreVeyon. And then in the big games, if you need to lean on TreVeyon a little bit more, go for it. But he's only getting 10 carries for 120 yards against Maryland. You know what I mean? And then that, a lot of it makes sense. And so I have no problem with Ohio State's doing philosophically, because there's still a high school driven recruiting operation. Do I think there's some panic in some of these moves? Yes, I do.
Yeah.
But philosophically, I don't have a problem with what Ohio State's doing at all. That'll be another conversation for another day, Ryan, because I do want to dive into some specific teams. I think that'll be good talk for us to have about, is what they're doing sustainable? You know what I mean? I think that'll be Louisville, USC, Ole Miss, Florida State. It's going to be Miami. But even Miami's still trying to recruit high school kids at a high level too. They are. And so, yeah. Last two questions. Here from Mike Reddy.
Mike Reddy, how do coaches find recruits when scouting, or are wide receivers recruited based on skill set or by position?
Well, it's both. I mean, there's a lot of things that goes into it. How do coaches find recruits when scouting? I mean, you get on the road. I mean, most of these kids about. I mean, you've got all these
Coach
scouting
Connect,
services. And I'm not even talking about scouting services like Riles and 247. I'm talking, there's actual real scouting services that will give you names and top players. And there's so much film available out there now. And it's so easy to get the film now. You make a call, hey, coach, can you send me this kid? And he literally just goes to his computer, hits blah, 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 send him game film and highlight film. You know what I mean? Like,
you could also just follow Tom Lemming on Twitter, and he'll tell you about every single player in the country.
You aren't like back in the day, Ryan, like when I was recruiting, like I'd have to call a coach, and then he'd have to, put the VHS tape together, put it in the mail, drop it off. Like when I was a GA at Duquesne, this is 2003. I had to go to the airport, drop a film off at the airport that got sent to the airport, and then their GA would have to go pick it up that night. And now it's just like you literally do it from your computer. It's changed the game, But you got to look at, okay, does this kid have the transcript we look for? There's all those type of things that go into it. But when you come specifically to receiver play, it's skill set and position. It's a combination of both. Meaning like, hey, you go into a recruiting cycle and boy, there's this really good big bodied, we only have one spot, and there's this really good big bodied receiver that we love. And there's this other kid that's a shiftier in space guy that we love. Who do you go after? Well, what's your need? If you've recruited like 3 big bodied guys in a row and you're coming up short on the space guys, then you go for the space guy. Opposite's true. If you landed a class, like let's say this year, Notre Dame's recruiting class is this, Ryan. Let's say they land Taylon Taylor, Dalen McCutcheon, Elijah Burris, and Lex Cyrus. That's a heck of a 4-man haul. But you know what? Next year, you better give me a couple big bodies, because I need some guys that can be volume guys or play. Right. So it just varies year to year and what your needs are. But you have to have guys that you're going to look for certain skill sets. And you're going to look for guys that can fit certain parts of what you're trying to do offensively. Now, there's always the notion of we can build around a guy, but if your entire roster is built for one thing, you can't change your entire offense because one guy doesn't fit that. You have to try to recruit into what you're doing. If you're taking over a team, maybe that's true, but when you're at a place for a while, you're recruiting to what you want. So it's a little bit of both, in my opinion.
Yep. A lot of layers to it, like you said. Whole lot.
All right. We did have two more questions. One more question pop up that I want to address, but we're not going to add any more. We're going to get to this question, then one more.
Mark with glasses, considering Notre Dame quarterback recent history, is Deuce Knight the most important recruits ever? Oh man, I no idea. I mean, recruiting's been happening for a very long time, so I mean that would there'd be a lot better people to ask than me, who's been covering recruiting for a couple years now. There's a long history of recruiting.
No, he's not the most important recruit ever. I mean, that's so much pressure to put on him. I think Deuce is a tremendous talent. I am so glad that Notre Dame got him. I do not even want to come close to putting that kind of pressure on him. Not even close. I mean, and I don't care if Deuce Knight's the best quarterback to ever play the game. If you don't build a class around him, it won't matter. I mean, Pat Mahomes had a losing record as a starting quarterback in college, right? You got to put him in the right system with the right players around him. So no, he's not the most. I don't know that there is a singular greatest recruit ever, because some people say, well, when he signed, Ron Paulus was that guy. Well, how'd that turn out?
Yeah,
I mean,
you could take most important in so many different ways as well.
Yeah.
I was thinking it's like a look back thing. Like if Deuce Knight comes to Notre Dame, brings a top 5 class with them, and they win a national championship,
couple titles,
sure. Like I'll look back and be like, wow, man, that was maybe the most important recruit ever. Like, You know what I mean? Like,
that's a great point, Ryan.
Yeah.
Let's see what he does first. Let's see who that. I mean, maybe it ends up being Kenny Minchie. Maybe Kenny Minchie's that guy that wins him with 2 titles. Maybe it's CJ. Maybe it's Deuce. Yeah, that's a great point, and that's a really good point, Ryan. But yeah, I would never put that pressure on a guy before he gets here. I think the best way to do that is retroact. Like who thought that? I mean, there's a lot of players you could point to where I say, boy, who thought that when Joe Burrow signed with Ohio State and then transferred to LSU, who thought at all that Joe Burrow was going to do what he did at LSU? Nobody, right? Yeah. I mean, so
there are many guys like that anyway. I mean, maybe when Clemson got Trevor Lawrence, they were like, man, that's the most important recruit we ever got. Like maybe, sure.
Yeah, so they could win another title after they had already won one 2 years before. Yeah. I mean, with Clemson, if you were going to make that argument, it would be Deshaun. That's who they would make. But then I'd say, but is Deshaun at Clemson if Taj Boyd doesn't do what he did to lay that foundation, to make it an attractive job to even – I mean, so you could play this game all day. You know what I mean? Yeah. All day. Let's see what happens when they play. I think that's a good way of looking at it, Ryan. And here is the last question that we are going to address today. This is a good way to end it.
Rocket25 says, does the 12-team playoff improve Notre Dame's chances of winning national championship? Pros and cons, needing to finish in the top 4 and win twice versus finishing in the top 12 and needing to win 4 games. Yeah, I mean, we've talked about this before. I mean, my quick thoughts on it are, I think it improves the chances because it's more likely every single year you're going to be in the fields. And I think with the parity in college football, I'm okay with the expansion of the playoff, especially now, because I think that there's just going to be more teams that are capable of potentially winning a national championship on a year-to-year basis. I think that pool is growing. I think that obviously the negatives are you're going to have to win more playoff games to win a championship, right? So that's going to decrease the chances. But I think it improves it overall. I think that just having the ability to consistently get in and more even playing field as far as the parity in college football at a higher level now, I think it improves Notre Dame's chances personally.
I was not originally of that viewpoint, Ryan, and I got it quickly. I got it changed pretty quickly. There's a couple other things that I'd point to that play into that as well. If you're getting into the top, first of all, it's harder to get in the top 4. And then it is the top 12 or 11 really for Notre Dame. So the more chances you have of getting into the playoff, the greater chance you have at winning it. Even if one year you got in as the 10 seed, right? I mean, so there's that. The other part of it too is in a 4-team playoff, every year you're going to have to beat one of Georgia, Ohio State, or Alabama or Clemson, like most years, right? Well, in a 12-team playoff, you don't always have to be the team that beats those teams. I mean, conceivably, you may only have to beat one of them because somebody else upset all those other teams in the set quarter. Because now there's quarters, because like one of the SEC teams. I mean, because football is so much about matchups. Maybe Georgia gets a terrible matchup. Maybe Bama wins the SEC or Texas wins the SEC, and Georgia gets in as the 5 seed or the 6 seed, and they get some horrible matchup for them in rounds 1 or in the quarters. I mean, and you don't have to play them. You know what I mean? So it's like if the number 2 team in the SEC, the number 2 team in the Big Ten, you're not going to have to play that team until the semis. And so it increases the odds that you don't have to win 2 huge games to win it all. Some years you're going to have to, but some years those teams may get knocked off by somebody who is also very good, but you match up better with. That's the thing. Like Notre Dame has not often matched up well against Alabama because they are as good as you are, if not better, at what is supposedly the bread and butter of who you are. You're a line-driven team. They're better along both lines. I mean, that's what was true in 2012, right? And that was true in 2020. Well, now they may get beat by a Michigan, but then you look at your team and say, hey, we match up better against Michigan, hypothetically speaking, right? But they don't match up well against Michigan, so Michigan handles their business, and now you match up better with this team, that kind of thing, right? I mean, those are all things that factor into it that, to me, open up the opportunities more for Notre Dame. There's just greater chance. I mean, I've mentioned this before. When the last time Michigan played for the national championship in basketball, they played 5 games to get to the title game. The highest seeded team they beat was a 7 seed. They played Loyola Chicago in the Final Four just because all the teams ahead of them got knocked off. It won't be to that degree in college football, but you'll still see some of that stuff. Like you will. I don't need to elaborate on it more, but you will. And so I think that just overall enhances it, combined with you're going to see them get in more, in my opinion. And the more you get in, the more
chances.
And not only that too, Ryan, but perhaps it helps your recruiting a little bit more. You get in and you win a game and you go maybe get a player that you wouldn't have got if you didn't get into a 14 playoff and you're playing in the Gator Bowl. Nobody cares. I mean, those are all possibilities that could factor into that, in my opinion. So, there we go. All right, that is going to do it, man. Why don't you go ahead and take us out of here, buddy?
All right. Well, everyone, appreciate you all for dropping in for the Monday mailbag. Before you go, you can just hit that like button for us. We really appreciate it on YouTube. Also hit that subscription and also notification bell so you know when the next podcast is coming up very shortly. If you listen to us on your favorite podcast platform, whether that is Apple, Spotify, or anything in between, make sure you hit a 5-star review. You can go to boardsirishbreakdown.com. We'll have some team recruiting and maybe some NFL draft intel going on throughout the rest of the week. And make sure to subscribe to the podcast once again. We'll talk to you again very soon here, folks. Appreciate the support as always here on the Irish Breakdown Podcast.